What's up everyone, how are you all? Today we are back with another blazing Naruto story. Orochimaru is Naruto's godfather. If you enjoy then please like, share and do comments. Things in Konohagakure no Sato were changing very quickly. For starters, the Third Shinobi War had recently been won by Konoha. They had taken their fair share of losses, but in the end they had pulled it off. Of course, the horrors of war were still very fresh in the minds of the populace. Luckily for them, the breath of fresh air they needed was at hand. The hero that had won them the war had been selected for Yondaime. Namikaze Minato received the honor from his friend and predecessor in Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Sandaime Hokage. Minato had accepted the offer graciously and became set to take office in a few short weeks. Hiruzen had made a wonderful decision in electing Minato to be his successor. Not only was he widely loved by the population, the female population more than the male for obvious reasons, but the ninja population as well. Many of them respected Minato for his fierce but kind heart and his skills in battle. Konoha became overjoyed by these words, but their good fortune had not stopped there. Not by a long shot. Konoha's villagers eventually found out that the Yondaime had a wife, much to the ire of the females, and it was none other than Uzumaki Kushina, the heiress of the Uzumaki clan. Again, Minato had become a wonderful choice. Konoha had deep ties with the Uzumaki since the Shodai Hokage had married one. Ever since then, the red swirl of the Uzumaki clan could be seen on almost all official ninja gear of Konoha. The day Minato became Hokage quickly became the best day Konoha had seen in a long time. It was true that times were hard with the recovery from the war and the loss of loved ones. What gave Konoha hope was Minato. As long as their white knight lived, then they would be able to weather any storm. Fast forward a few months to the date of October 10th. Minato and Kushina had left in a hurry, leaving a Hokage sealed note that gave Hiruzen powers of the office until Minato returned. That was the official reasoning behind the duo's disappearance. The actual reason is that Kushina had gone into labor after months of hiding from the public view to keep the child a secret. Hiruzen was all too happy to oblige. He needed something to occupy his mind. Well, something other than the obvious pain he had to endure every day. No pain hurt as much as a teacher that failed the student. And in Hiruzen's eyes he fit that perfectly. He had failed his most prized student in Orochimaru and allowed him to fall down the path of hate. Some said that he had no choice in the matter. That it was all Orochimaru's choice to become the way he was and that he shouldn't hold himself accountable. But how could he not? His students were like his children, and to fail one of them hurt beyond measure. Yes, he dearly needed something to occupy his mind. Hidden location near Konoha. Kushina lay in her bed, her hair matted thickly with sweat from the arduous labor she had just put her body through. Childbirth was no laughing matter, and the pain caused from it would be enough to kill anyone. And in some cases it did. But regardless of her physical condition, she had pushed through the exhaustion and successfully delivered her child. The child currently slept in the fair-skinned arms of one Senju Tsunade. She had been asked to oversee the birth of the baby as a personal favor from Minato and Kushina. Jiraiya wanted to be there too, but due to a complication in his spy network he was unable to attend. Speaking of Minato, the Hokage held a smiling and vibrant smile on his face. This had to be his most favorite moment in his life thus far. Being made Hokage and marrying Kushina coming in close second. Not to downplay those events, but something about his child made him feel so alive. Well, congratulations Kushina on a perfectly healthy baby. Tsunade smiled softly to the two exhausted parents. She had purposely left out the gender of the child. Kushina and Minato had elected to be surprised by the gender of the baby. And judging by the looks on their faces, Tsunade knew they wanted to know. Kushina simply held out her arms in a "give me the baby" fashion. Tsunade chuckled softly and walked over to hand the bundle over to the mother. Kushina carefully and gradually took the baby into her arms. She had never smiled so widely in her life. What she held in her arms was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen in her life. In her arms was a boy with the most beautiful cerulean eyes she had ever seen. They seemed to pull her in and go on forever. Much like an ocean. His skin resembled his father's in its complexion. His hair rivaled the spikiness of his father and the redness of his mother. All in all, the child resembled the parents very strongly. Tsunade smiled at the two as they took in every detail of their child. She watched their eyes hungrily devour the boy's image in its entirety. She wanted to laugh when Kushina stopped staring and furrowed her brow in deep thought. "Minato, what do you think we should name him?" Kushina asked softly. They wanted to keep the gender a secret between them. As such, they couldn't come up with a name they both liked without knowing the gender. How about Naruto?" Minato asked hopefully, rubbing the back of his head sheepishly. He had read about the name in the first book Jiraiya ever published. It didn't do as good as the ones he sold now, but it held a much stronger meaning. The name came from that book. Kushina thought about it. She had read the book as well and accepted it as a good book. That being said, she didn't exactly like the idea of her baby being named after that character and by proxy become associated with Jiraiya and his books. She knew about his so-called masterpieces and hated them. "I think we should name him after the father mostly. How does Mino sound?" This caught his attention. He was honored to have his wife say that she wanted their son to be named after him. It brought a tear to his eye just thinking about the love this woman held for him. "I think that would be great." "Mino it is." He smiled at her. Not a small smile, but one so large it threatened to break his face in half if it grew any bigger. Kushina smiled back at her husband, best friend. She couldn't believe her luck in finding her soulmate. Tsunade smiled at them and turned to leave when she felt a chakra signature moving towards them. A chakra she had become very accustomed to as she had been working with it for years now. Plus this level of power could only come from 5 people. 2 of which were in the room with her and the other 2 were busy with their own life. Which left only one option left. "Orochimaru," she said quietly. The 2 distracted parents didn't hear it over their own conversation. Tsunade whirled around on her heel and opened her mouth to speak when something stopped her. Something small and sharp. Her eyes became heavy as she fell to the side, causing both parents to look over. What they saw was the snake Sannin Orochimaru standing over the prone body of his former teammate. An all too familiar smirk adorned on his lips. Minato instantly tensed up at the sight of his sensei's teammate. The same man who rivaled him for the Hokage position. "What do you want?" Minato ground out. His distaste for the Sannin extremely evident at that point. The snake seemed to get some mild enjoyment out of making Minato all tensed and worried. This would most certainly play into the plan he had. "Kukuku dear Minato, how are you? And is that a child I see?" His voice taunted Minato to test him. Taunting him to give in to his base anger and strike out against him. Sadly, Minato held his ground and simply stared him down. The ice in his eyes plainly visible. "Leave now or I will kill you." It wasn't a threat in any way. It was a promise of a lifetime. One that Minato backed up by launching his killer intent at the Sannin. Orochimaru simply smiled at Minato. He had been in tighter positions than this one and his killer intent was roughly the same as his, so it held little effect to him. Instead of verbally responding, Orochimaru shot his tongue out, wrapped it around the baby, and pulled it towards him. Kushina, being as exhausted as she was, had little time to respond before the baby was yanked out of her arms. She would have lunged at the Sannin, but he held a kunai to the child's neck with a twisted grin. "Not so fast, Minato," Orochimaru said to the blonde, who attempted to throw his tri-pronged kunai at him. "Unless you want the baby to die, I suggest you do as I say." Minato slowly lowered his kunai, much to the sick pleasure of the Sannin. "Now I need some time alone here with Kushina. Minato, you will take this baby and leave or I will activate the seal on him and kill him. The seal will dissolve if you are far enough away from me." Minato was about to ask why Orochimaru wanted Kushina, but he gave him no time to think. Orochimaru lobbed the child in the air and dashed at Kushina, his fingers ablaze with chakra. Minato jumped over to the baby, grabbed it, and vanished in a yellow flash. Orochimaru slammed his palm on Kushina's belly, causing the seal to glow a violent orange. Namikaze Estate. Minato and Mino arrived in the golden flash of light that the Hokage became famous with. Luckily he had arrived in the baby room of the house. In the heat of the moment he had forgotten to aim for a certain room and simply launched to the house. It was pure luck he managed to land here. "Be safe, Mino. Daddy will be back soon. I promise." It happened at this moment. Right as the silence settled over the 2 boys, a roar could be heard. Not a simple roar from an animal or even one from a person. No, this one came from something much bigger and much stronger. If the chakra he was feeling was anything to go by. Minato rushed to the window and frowned deeply. deeper than any frown he had ever worn in his life. Standing at the walls of Konoha was a beast of impressive size and power. The 9 tails of the beast swayed angrily at the village. The Kyuubi no Kitsune had come to his village. The village had met this force head-on despite the strength. Constantly balls of fire and explosive tags were launched at the Kyuubi. None of it seemed to have any effect other than pushing the beast back or just plain angering it further. Minato watched as a small blue dot moved up the red beast's fur and stopped right at the ear. A split second later the Kyuubi howled out in momentary pain. Must have been Kakashi and his Chidori. Minato thought with a small smile. That boy was something else. After roughly 5 minutes of watching, it became painfully obvious that the shinobi on the front would not be able to stop this beast on their own. He would have to do something about this beast. Sadly enough, the only thing he knew to best this beast would be to seal it away, but that would require a life and a sacrifice. He hated this, having to use his boy like this, but he is the only one that could hold this beast at bay for all of his life. He had no problems with dying, to be honest. He didn't want to, of course, but he came to terms with death after his parents had died. One thing is certain for the Hokage. Orochimaru would pay for releasing this beast upon his precious village. Meanwhile, on the front things were easily going from worse to nightmarish in a hurry. Most of the main shinobi force that had met the Kyuubi were either running low on chakra, dead, or dying quickly. The only relief they got was in the form of the Sandaime Hokage making his way with his Anbu force. Luckily a few Anbu were at the scene of action already, coordinating the efforts to the best of their ability. "Lord Hokage," the bird-faced Anbu member called out. A moment later the Sandaime arrived in his black shinobi gear and a few Anbu behind him. "Bird, what is the situation?" the aged voice of Hiruzen demanded. His veteran voice seemed to cut through all of the noise and chatter on the field. The bird paled a bit at the voice before regaining his composure to answer. "Sir, many are running out of chakra and supplies. Some are bleeding out and others are dead. Sadly, it doesn't seem like we are making any progress against it." Sarutobi took in those words grimly. They desperately needed help against this beast. Hopefully, the fourth would have a plan. For now though, "Bird, gather those with chakra and paper bombs. Tell them to wait for my signal before launching everything they have left. We have to fight this thing off until the fourth can arrive." Bird nodded wordlessly and set off to do his task. Hiruzen turned around to his small task force. "You four have the same job. Please hurry." They all vanished without a word. The Sandaime ran through a few hand seals and summoned his friend, Enma. "Eh? Oh hey Sarutobi, need me for the staff again?" the Monkey King asked. Hiruzen sighed sadly at the words but nodded nonetheless. Enma sighed and puffed into a plume of smoke. The Sandaime reached into the smoke and pulled out his famous staff. Sarutobi jumped up to a building with a grim expression adorning his face. The Kyuubi, upon sensing an extremely powerful chakra nearby, turned his head to see the person. He was sadly disappointed when it was a small and elderly human. "Who are you?" the Kyuubi inquired. Despite what most would say, the Kyuubi could be quite civilized but very quick to anger. Hiruzen was slightly taken aback by the voice of the beast but shook himself clear of it. "The Sandaime Hokage of Konoha." And with that the elderly man leapt into the air, carrying the staff with him. He raised it over his head and brought it down with thunderous force. Enma sensed his summoner's will and extended to cover the distance. The result of their tandem unison was a loud crack on the top of the Kyuubi's head. The Kyuubi growled out in pain that resonated from his head. He retaliated by bringing up one of his tails and launching it straight at the Sandaime. But he was not a Hokage for this long for nothing. Instead of being speared by the tail, Hiruzen timed his jump and landed on the tail. Quickly the old man took off running down the tail of the Kyuubi. The fox shook his tail violently, intent on knocking him off. Sarutobi jumped off the tail just before that. He looked down. He floated above the midsection of the beast. He noticed an opening and took it. The ex-Hokage front flipped in the air, bringing the staff crashing down on the Kyuubi's ribs. The beast cringed in on that side. The Kyuubi blasted his thick killer intent out from his body. It pushed the air so harshly the Sandaime was pushed back and forced to land on a tree top. "That thing is impossibly strong. When I hit it I felt like I did nothing to it. And I put all my strength behind those 2 strikes." The Sandaime grimly thought to himself. Things weren't looking too good for him if he couldn't do strikes that could hurt. Maybe his ninjutsu would work. The Kyuubi turned towards the Hokage on the tree top and began running towards him. Hiruzen jumped back just as his tree became splinters, all the while performing a short set of hand seals and building chakra. Once done, he opened his mouth and called out, "Kaden! Karyu Enden!" At that moment a large and daunting dragon-shaped flame erupted from Hiruzen's mouth. The flame went no more than 5 meters before slamming its head into the Kyuubi's face, forcing the beast to stop its charge and lose sight of his target. With Hiruzen, the blast from his attack had enough force to stop the Kyuubi from advancing, but the pressure had pushed him back as well. He had no time to react as he smashed through tree branches only to land in a clearing. He quickly hopped up and looked around. Nothing was too out of the ordinary. Just some trees, the moon, the giant red fox in the background. Oh, that, and the altar with a baby in it and Kushina standing right next to the baby with a frown on her face. Sarutobi moved over to her side quickly, curious as to why she stood next to the baby. But one look at the child proved to be enough. The child belonged to her. "Kushina, why are you here?" The redhead whirled to the elderly man, sadness locking her expression down. "Minato needs me for the seal." This made his eyes widen. The Shikifu Jin was nothing to mess around with, as it consumed the soul of the one who used it. "How does he play?" A vicious roar ripped through the quiet clearing. Both parties looked up to see a massive toad sitting atop the Kyuubi. Minato had appeared in front of them in a flash of gold, a grim expression on his face. "Lord Third," Minato started out. His voice sounded grated like nails on a chalkboard. Like the man's soul had been ripped from his very chest and he was forced to live on without it. "I need you to hold off the Kyuubi while Kushina and I prepare the seal." Hiruzen really wanted to trade places with Kushina, but their demeanor and stances at the moment suggested that they would not take no for an answer. "I will do my best." With that he hopped away, intent on stopping the beast for the moment. If only to buy some time for them. Minato and Kushina set off to write the ink needed for the transfer and sealing of a tailed beast. Sarutobi stood alone on this fight. The Kyuubi stalked slowly towards them, no doubt sensing the chakra signatures of the 3 powerful ninja gathered. He had only one shot at this and he would have to make it good or the beast would ruin their plans. "Kage Bushin no Jutsu," the Sandaime called out, forming one perfect clone next to him as a result. The duo had to wait just a few more seconds or this would fail greatly. The Kyuubi took on more massive step forward. It was then that the Sandaime clone, armed with half of the original's chakra, leapt onto a tree, then into the sky. Directly above the Kyuubi's head, Kaden Goryuka no Jutsu. A large mass of dragon-shaped flames erupted from the clone's mouth. The Kyuubi looked up just in time to see the giant mass of flames smash right into the crown of his head. The force from the impact and resulting explosion alone had pushed the Kyuubi's head toward the earth at a rapid pace. The clone puffed away with a smile. The real Sandaime knew that this was the time. He gathered up what remained of his chakra and made his move. Quickly he dashed under the large beast's descending head and put his jutsu into motion. "Doden! Doryuheki!" he called out, slamming his hands onto the earth floor beneath him. Instantly a wall of solid earth rose from the ground. The wall could easily be compared to that of a mountain rising from the ground. As the wall rose, the jaw of the red fox smashed into it with full force, destroying the wall in the process. The Kyuubi lay on the ground, disoriented from the collision. Hiruzen fell to one knee and could only hope that he had bought them enough time. Seconds later the Sandaime fell to the side and passed out from exhaustion. His elderly body simply could not keep up with these kinds of fights anymore. Few minutes later, Minato held Kushina's body close to him. She had used the Shikifu Jin on the Kyuubi to rip its yin part from its body. The Yondaime had used his chakra to perform the seal on the other half of the Kyuubi and seal it inside of his son, who hadn't stopped crying since. "Minato, my love, please don't let this make you bitter. Be kind and caring. Mino will need that from you. But promise me one thing?" Kushina asked between heavily labored breaths. Minato looked to be on the verge of breaking on the inside. Only Kushina's words held him together. "Anything, my love," Minato quickly responded. He knew the effects of the seal and as such knew that she didn't have long to live. Kushina smiled and leaned in close to him. "Make that bastard suffer." were her last words before going completely limp in his arms. Minato hugged her body close and began to rock back and forth, crying all the while. Even Mino had stopped crying long enough for his father to realize that he was still there. Setting Kushina down gently, he walked over and picked up his baby. He smiled at the child, the only piece of Kushina and family he had left in this world. He would protect the child and love it like no other. He owed the baby and Kushina that much. Quite the touching scene. The same slimy voice from before spoke from the shadows. Minato whirled around quickly to see who it was, holding the baby tightly to his chest for protection. Once again Orochimaru stepped from the shadows with a smirk adorning his features. "You caused this," the Yondaime hollered at the man. Orochimaru simply put a finger up to his chin with his other hand supporting his elbow. His golden eyes glowed faintly in the night. "Actually, I believe that Kyuubi did this. Well, I did release him. But oh well, it was fun while it lasted." He licked his lips evilly at that last thought. Something about his home village paying for their sins against him made him feel all warm inside. Minato gritted his teeth, dangerously narrowing his eyes at the Sannin. Orochimaru noticed him and laughed merrily at him. What could the Yondaime do in his position? Fighting him was out. He's far too weak for that. "Don't worry, I'm not here to kill you. I want you to be at your best when I do that. I came to leave you with a message. I will come back, and when I do you had better be ready for a fight." The snake Sannin let his words sink in while he sunk into the ground. Minato sighed and looked back to his child. This baby would be his strength in the years to come. 12 years later, a 12-year-old boy opened his eyes for the first time of the day. He turned toward the window. A single ray of light had managed to get through and beam him directly in the eyes, thus waking him up. The boy groaned when he got out of bed. He hated mornings, but he learned to deal with them. The boy walked over to the bathroom to use it as per his daily routine. Once done, he flushed his toilet and began to wash his hands. Once done, he splashed a small amount of water onto his face to wake himself up from his hazy mind. He took the towel from the side and used it to dry his face off before looking himself in the mirror. The reflection portrayed that of an obviously young boy. His hair, jet black and long, almost like a black silk. His skin seemed paler than the moonlight on a full moon. His eyes were like silted emeralds that seemed to glow when he became angry. His eyes were adorned by a green marking on either side. His face and body frame held a good deal of width to them, making him seem and look much more human. His name was Naruto and he was an orphan. He had no family that he could have ever recalled seeing. Heck, he didn't even have a family name or anything to go by. He was simply Naruto, and for the most part he was alone. But he didn't face the world alone. No, he had a caretaker and father figure. The caretaker of Naruto was none other than the Sandaime Hokage. The old man had taken up the mantle of caring for Naruto when he had found out about the boy's true origins. Not that it was exactly difficult to do. The eye markings and silted eyes were practically a dead giveaway. Naruto walked back to his room and got dressed for the day. He didn't have much in life and his attire reflected such. He wore a black long-sleeve shirt with a sage green t-shirt over top. He wore the same sage green colored pants with blue shinobi sandals. He sighed as he put his sandals on. He wanted to join the academy and become a ninja more than anything in the world. But the civilian council strictly forbade him from joining out of fear and somehow convinced the shinobi council to agree. That hadn't stopped him in the slightest. In fact, it had spurred him on to become better and train harder. The Sandaime overlooked some of his training sessions, and each time he couldn't be more shocked. It seemed that Naruto had picked up his father's ability and natural skill. His taijutsu and ninjutsu were among the best he had seen since Orochimaru. This scared the ex-Hokage, but luckily Naruto seemed to have no interest in using his skills for the wrong reasons. Training Ground 44. Naruto had just gotten done with another grueling training exercise that consisted of running sprints up and down a rather lengthy tree. Sweat rolled down his forehead in droves. This training pushed his body to the limit each time. Slowly but surely it made him faster as well. Fighting against gravity and all. "Hello, Naruto." The elder voice of the Sandaime spoke out. Naruto turned around with his sweat rag and smiled. He always enjoyed the visits the old man gave him, even though they were few. "Hey old man," Naruto cried out happily. The Sandaime very well may have been his father for all the stuff he taught Naruto. "How goes the training?" The ex-Hokage inquired. Naruto's smile vanished as he took a more serious look. Training for him was almost always a serious matter. Good for the most part. Rough but worth it. Maybe this year they will let me take the test. Naruto grumbled that last part, but Hiruzen heard him well enough to know what he said. It saddened him that the civilian council held such a strong grudge against Orochimaru that he carried it over to his son in some regards. In short, Minato hated the boy for no reason other than who his father was. Because of this, Hiruzen had trained Naruto-sama on the side in hopes of him being eligible to take the graduation exam. Of course, Hiruzen had Naruto hold off on the exams till he felt like he was ready. Today was that day. Naruto, I have a surprise for you. Naruto's face turned from depressed to focused in an instant. The last time he had a surprise, it happened to be his favorite jutsu. Or at least his most used jutsu. You are going to take the test today. You'll be going up against Uchiha Sasuke, this year's #1 rookie. Naruto paled at that. He had never fought another person in all of his life. Not even the villagers or ninja that used to beat on him. He figured that if he attacked back, he would only be proving them right when they called him a freak, or snake, or monster. Naruto had asked the Sandaime about those names and only received a dry and unfeeling look in return. Add on top of that, this was the #1 rookie he would have to go against. Someone who no doubt had more experience from fighting in training sessions than Naruto. Naruto, please don't worry so much. I am sure you will do fine. All you have to do is show that you know the basics and you pass. You can do this. I believe that you can. The Sandaime smiled softly at the pale boy. He may have messed up with Orochimaru, but he would not let Naruto isolate himself from others and fall down that path. Naruto's eyes began to water at the edges. He could always count on the Sandaime to make him feel better when he was feeling down in the dumps or daunted by a prospect. Now being one of those times. Naruto wiped the tears from his eyes and focused them. He would pull this off for the old man. Let's go, Naruto proclaimed with a fist pump. He could truly be a happy child if he was ever given the chance to be. Sarutobi smiled and began walking with Naruto. Close to the academy, Sarutobi smiled at his own thoughts. Having Naruto go against the Uchiha was a perfect idea. It would get Naruto a team and keep him from falling down a dark path, and would teach the Uchiha to be a bit more humble. Plus it would sure grab the council's attention. Hopefully they would realize that they were wrong about Naruto and would lay off of him. Naruto on the other hand didn't smile. His hand kept going back to check his kunai strap on his leg. His palms and head could not have sweated more even if he tried. He couldn't help but be nervous. His first fight was against an Uchiha and the last on at that. Along the way Naruto had managed to squeeze that piece of information out of Hiruzen. It certainly didn't help him in any way. All he knew about the Uchiha is that we're a strong clan with the Sharingan before most of them got wiped out by Sasuke's older brother Itachi. Naruto could only hope that Sasuke hadn't activated his Sharingan yet. Naruto was pulled from his thoughts when Hiruzen pulled on his sleeve and pointed ahead of them to a training ground where the challenge would take place. The training ground had a simple layout. Some trees to the left and right and a clearing driven between them. Just solid ground and grass in the clearing. A man with a scar on his nose and tied back brown hair greeted the two of them. Lord Third, it is an honor to see you again. He gave a slight bow to the man. The Sandaime smiled and nodded to the man. This must be Naruto? The man turned towards Naruto. His eyes appraised Naruto. Naruto held out his hand. Naruto. The man almost took a step back out of fear but shook his head, then shook the pale child's hand. Amino Iruka. The now identified Iruka spoke with a friendly voice and a smile. Naruto mentally sighed to himself. He was afraid the man would be nasty to him. But maybe the Sandaime being here had something to do with his kindness. Please follow me, Naruto, and we will go to the testing site. Iruka said flatly and began to walk. Iruka thought that this whole thing was simply a show to make the Uchiha feel better about himself. Not to mention the rumors about the council not liking the boy. A few moments later the trio arrived at the training ground. Naruto's eyes darted around and began to appease the area, looking for anything that might give him an edge to win. What he noticed first was a boy, no taller than him, standing with his arms crossed and his eyes focused directly on Naruto. Hello Sarutobi. The voice of Hiruzen's old teammate Danzo cut through the silence. Hello Danzo. Hiruzen replied with equal authority in his voice. The air grew cold around the two men. The civilian council in the back shrunk back at the pressure the two of them released. Sasuke and Naruto didn't bother to look at the two men and kept their eyes locked on each other, looking for any weaknesses that the other had. Naruto's silted eyes hardened on Sasuke's onyx eyes. Both of them took a stance at the same time. Iruka sprung into action, landing in between them. I see you both are ready. Very well. Begin. Iruka hopped back out of the way. His words drew the attention of all those watching, namely the Sandaime and the civilian council. Danzo showed up for the excuse to see how the boy progressed compared to his father at this age. The two fighters stood perfectly still, both of them waiting for the silent signal that the earth would provide for them. Just then a strong gust of wind blew through the clearing between the two boys. Their eyes widened and they took off towards each other. Sasuke made the first move by attempting to hit Naruto in the face with a right hook. Naruto saw this coming and dropped into a squat, narrowly dodging the attack. He then threw a left towards the center of Sasuke's stomach. The dark-haired boy spun to the side, while spinning he dropped into a sweeping kick. Naruto's eyes widened when he saw Sasuke's foot come across the ground to him. He hopped slightly in the air, spun to gain momentum, and brought his foot down right on Sasuke's head. The Uchiha grunted in pain and rolled back and away from the pale-skinned Naruto. The crunch of the Uchiha's neck had made a few council members to gasp and mutter amongst themselves about Naruto going too far. Danzo smirked silently to himself. The boy had managed to stay ahead of the Uchiha the entire fight thus far and landed the first blow. Hiruzen smiled at the scene. Naruto was doing great and showing the Uchiha a worthwhile fight. The two had engaged in a hand-to-hand fight again. Sasuke was determined to prove that he could best Naruto. The pale boy blocked or straight-up dodged all of Sasuke's punches and kicks. It wasn't until Sasuke missed an uppercut that Naruto planted his fist into his face and sent him sailing. Naruto watched Sasuke fly and noticed his body had started shaking. He had never felt anything like this feeling. The feeling of fighting and winning felt far too good for him. He wanted more of it. He wanted the Uchiha to feel his rage that he kept bottled up for so long. Sasuke stood up and decided that he had been hit one time too many and went to land the finishing blow. Running through head seals, the Uchiha were famous for he sucked in a big gulp of air. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu. And Sasuke let the huge ball of flame fly through the air and at Naruto with hurtling speed. Naruto couldn't really dodge it seeing its size, but that's when a plan entered his head. A plan to win. Doden. Doryuheki. Naruto called out and slammed his hands on the ground. The earth rose up to meet the ball of fire dead on. The fireball hit and instantly became extinguished against the hard surface, sending smoke everywhere and blocking vision. From the smoke, Naruto came running right at Sasuke. The raven-haired boy, still breathing slightly heavy from the jutsu he just launched, brought his defense up. Naruto brought his knee up for a gut shot. Sasuke launched his fist straight through Naruto's head. Literally straight through. Sasuke's eyes widened when he realized the Naruto he was fighting was a clone. Suddenly the real Naruto appeared behind Sasuke, jabbing a kunai into his knee. Sasuke dropped to his injured knee with a grunt. Naruto swung his leg and cracked it across the side of Sasuke's face. The Uchiha lay face down in the ground, unconscious from the kick. Naruto pulled his kunai out of the boy's leg. For some reason he couldn't stop himself from thinking that at any moment the Uchiha would wake up and try to kill him. Naruto felt his blood scream for the death of the person who had tried to harm him. And at the moment, he wasn't sure he could stop himself from killing the Uchiha. His bloodlust had just become too great and needed to be satisfied. Luckily Hiruzen noticed the look and jumped in to stop him. Very good Naruto, but that's enough. Now put the kunai away. Naruto growled lowly at the Sandaime, sounding an awful lot like his Sannin father. You're kidding, right? This piece of trash is the rookie of the year? Pathetic if you ask me. It seems Konoha needs me more than I thought. And with that Naruto hopped away from the scene. Hiruzen sighed to himself. Orochimaru had been the same way when he first fought a worthwhile opponent. It would seem Naruto picked that up too. Very good. Very impressive for a genin. I haven't seen one so skilled since, well, Orochimaru. Danzo spoke with a mockingly happy tone. Though it was true, Orochimaru had been one hell of a genin in his time. The civilian council murmured amongst themselves, talking about how the son of the snake Sannin handily defeated the last Uchiha. It seemed to them that they had wasted their efforts on the wrong child prodigy. They decided that they would allow Naruto to join a team. Naruto's house. Naruto walked in through the front door and sighed. He was coming down from his high of fighting the Uchiha and was not happy about it. He loved the feeling of fighting and wanted to do it all the time if it meant he would never have to been dead again. Fighting made him feel alive. He also pondered what it would feel like to kill someone. Stabbing the Uchiha had brought a rush blasting through his system. He could not imagine what killing someone would make him feel like. He shuddered slightly at the thought, a twisted grin covering over his face. Naruto quickly shook his head. These thoughts were wrong and the Sandaime would be disappointed in him for even thinking like that. Naruto hung his head when he thought about the old man. Hiruzen would no doubt be very upset with him for acting the way he did during the fight and after. With a heavy sigh he walked into his room and plopped down on his bed. A small and annoying thought kept into his head while his thoughts raged about. This is only the beginning. Amino Iruka walked into his classroom with a sense of uneasiness about him. He arrived at his class roughly 5 minutes late because he had talked to the Sandaime about Naruto. The boy had interested him and he wanted to learn more about him. However, what he learned was not what he had expected. He found out that Naruto is the son of Orochimaru, the snake Sannin of Konoha. Or rather ex-Konoha ninja, but that didn't really matter. The man could easily crush almost any ninja out there with little to no effort at all. And the fact that he had bore a child with his same talent level scared Iruka. Of course the Sandaime assured Iruka that Naruto was nothing like his father and would never fall prey to the same influences as Orochimaru had. That still didn't stop Iruka from being wary of the child. He trusted the ex-Hokage. Not the son of one of the most dangerous men alive. In fact, the class must have felt the same thing. Because when Iruka snapped out of his thoughts to begin assigning teams he heard no noise. Iruka blinked at the sudden phenomenon. The whole class was never ever this silent. Even the Haruno and Yamanaka were dead silent. As Iruka watched the class he noticed that their eyes seemed to be stealing glances at the pale-skinned Naruto. Not that the boy paid them any attention, however. He stared straight at the board and waited for his team to be announced. A rather pleased smile on his pale face. Iruka opened his mouth to begin speaking when Uchiha Sasuke opened up the door. He walked into the class with a slight hobble to his leg from the previous day's actives. His fan club immediately began an uproar upon seeing their beloved Sasuke hurt or injured in any way, shape or form. "Oh poor Sasuke," the pink-haired Sakura called out. Only Kami knows how she got her voice to become so high and so annoying. Hearing the screeching voice of his loudest fangirl, Sasuke cringed. Coming up quickly behind her was the blonde-haired Yamanaka heiress. "Move forehead. Sasuke needs someone pretty to look at to feel better." The Yamanaka shoved Haruno out of the way and onto her backside. She stopped for a moment to hold a triumphant smirk over her rival before turning back to their mutual point of interest. "Oh Sasuke, how on earth did you get hurt?" Yamanaka asked quietly, afraid her question might have offended him in some way. Sasuke just grunted and narrowed his eyes. The platinum blonde followed his eyes to see where they landed. She held back a gasp when his eyes landed on the newest kid in the room. Naruto turned his head when he felt a strong glare attack him. Seeing that it was only Sasuke, he met and matched his glare with one of his own. The whole room grew silent and watched the two boys stare each other down. Iruka sat still, silently hoping that the two wouldn't break out into a fight again. Sakura was contemplating whether or not to smash Naruto's face in for hurting her precious Sasuke. Ino, the Yamanaka, stared with her mouth agape. This was the kid that had managed to best Sasuke? Mizuki, Iruka's teaching helper, wore perhaps the best face of surprise. This boy looked exactly like his master. Even his glare looked just like Orochimaru's glare. Not that anyone knew who Mizuki associated with anyway. He was a rather shady person. Eventually Sasuke grunted and hobbled up to his seat. By the time the fan club had recovered from their shock, their idol had already taken his seat. The rest of the girls rushed over to get the one empty seat next to Sasuke. Naruto watched on with mild amusement as the fan group migrated over to the only seat next to the Uchiha heir. Naruto could care less about that though. He was more excited to see which team he would be put on and who would be his teammates. Soon Iruka worked up that nerve to speak again, hoping that this time there would be no menacing showdown between students. Right. Anyway, from this day forth you are all shinobi of Konohagakure no Sato. I expect each and every one of you to remember what I have taught you and remember the will of fire. Remember this and you will do fine in this life. Iruka waited while the resounding roar of the crowd eventually died down. He could hear many cries of victory and promises to uphold the will of fire, but these aren't what interested him. What interested him was Naruto. The boy had not joined in on any of the celebrations or anything. He just stared blankly at the wall, focused on getting his team. Quiet down now. Iruka held up a tanned hand to silence the children. It took them a few more moments and cold glares from the two teachers, but they did settle down. Now we will be assigning your teams to you as given to us by the Hokage. After that your sensei will meet you here in about an hour, so you have some time to get to know your new team. A round of nods from the students, except a few kids, told Iruka it was time to get on with the show. Each kid wanted to see their team. Each wanted to know who they would be spending a great deal of time with. Their excitements began to fill the air and made it thick with anticipation. Iruka went through the first 6 teams. Each time he called out a team, the female member would let out a whine while the boys seemed unaffected but happy regardless. The biggest bomb when it came to the teams was Team 7. Team 7 will be composed of Uchiha Sasuke. This caught the attention of everyone in the room. Even Naruto looked to see who would be paired with the last Uchiha. Haruno Sakura. A vicious screech of victory echoed throughout the room. And Inuzuka Kiba. Your Jonin sensei will be Hitaki Kakashi. Iruka moved over to the Team 8 slot and began writing. Now for Team 8. The room grew silent again. Only a few students remained to be put on teams, and now that the Uchiha had been put on a team, they wanted to see who the pale kid would go with. First up is Aburame Shino. The bug users simply nodded in acceptance of the situation. Most of the other students cringed at the name. Bugs alone were creepy enough. But bugs that crawled out of human skin? Most certainly shudder-worthy. Hyuga Hinata. The Hyuga heir blushed when her name was called. Though on the inside she was a little sad. She had wished to be paired with Mino, but his father, the Yondaime, personally oversaw his training. The students held their breath again. The last member always seemed to be the most interesting as it completed the group. And lastly, Naruto. Your sensei will be Yuichi Kurenai. The room went dead silent, but that was to be expected. No one knew Naruto. Hell, no one had even seen Naruto until now. Naruto smirked to himself. He loved that no one knew anything about him. It made him an unpredictable ninja, and that would save his life when he needed it. He knew about the Hyuga from Hiruzen, holders of the famous Byakugan and gentle fist-fighting style. Then the Aburame, wielder of the chakra-draining insects. Talented bunch they were. He had been so absorbed in his own thoughts that he hadn't heard the other teams called, nor did he see the other teams file out of the room to meet and greet each other. Naruto blinked and looked around to see his two teammates next to each other but not talking. He sighed to himself and walked over to them. Hello you two. My name is Naruto. It is nice to meet you. He gave them a slight bow. The Hyuga blushed and the Aburame nodded. He took this as a good sign and sat down next to Hinata. Normally he would be okay with the silence, but the Sandaime had urged him to build bonds with his teammates. Silently cursing the old man, he sucked in a breath. Would you two like to go outside and talk? I brought snacks for all of us. This way we can get to know each other. What do you say? He said with a slight smile. The duo looked at each other, then back to the pale kid and nodded. Together the three of them left and walked outside. Once outside, the group found an empty table and sat down on it. Naruto distributed some rice balls among the group with a small, albeit forced, smile. He truly felt awkward in these types of situations because he had very little experience when it came to people who didn't hate him. Soon the silence became far too awkward for Naruto to handle. He decided that he would go first. Well, I guess I can go first. My name is Naruto. I like science and training. I dislike people who judge others without knowing them first. My dream is to make my grandfather happy by becoming a great ninja. Naruto watched the two swallow the information he gave them. He really didn't have much to say about himself that he hadn't already. He had no history to go over. No parents to talk about. Only the Sandaime. The Hyuga nodded and went to twiddling her fingers. Shino gave no apparent look, only a very slight nod in return. My name is Aburame Shino, as you have been informed. I am the heir to the Aburame clan and wish to be a great leader for the clan. I like different species of insects. I dislike those who kill bugs for no reason other than they are different looking, or those that judge others without prior knowledge. Naruto smiled at the boy. He had strong convictions, plus he disliked when people judged others. My name is Hyuga Hinata. I am the heiress to the Hyuga C clan. I like cinnamon buns and CC confidence. I dislike hate and separations. My dream is to be noticed by a certain someone. Naruto smirked to himself. She left out that she was painfully shy, but she seemed nice enough. Again Shino only gave the briefest of nods towards the girl. The kids were about to continue talking about each other when a swirl of leaves arrived. Out of the swirl a rather tall woman with long black hair and ruby red eyes appeared. Her white and red outfit caught Naruto's eye as it was not the normal attire for a jonin to wear. Nice to see that my cute genin are getting to know each other already. The woman smiled. Hinata suspected that this may be Kurenai due to her timely appearance and suggestion that they were her cute little genin. You must be Kurenai-sensei. The ever-dull voice of Shino rang out. The woman turned to him and smiled softly at him. That's correct. I will tell you more but not here. Meet me at Training Ground 8 in 10 minutes. Another swirl of leaves came by and once again the genin were all alone. Each of them shared a look before dashing off to go meet their sensei. With Kurenai at Training Ground 8, the ruby-eyed Kurenai stood in the center of her training ground silently. She was thinking of the past week's events. As customary, she and all the other jonin had found out their teams and their roles at the same so that they all could prepare and teach these kids properly. Kurenai could not be sure what to think of her team though. She had the Hyuga heiress, a girl she had longed to help out and be there forever since she had found out about her situation. Her home life was less than savory and had caused her a great deal of pain and suffering. And it was all because she wasn't the daughter those damned council members had wanted. Next up was the Aburame heir, Shino. In truth, she had no idea what to think of him and his family. She held zero ill will towards them, of course. They were splendid ninja and very good tacticians when it came to fighting and usage of their bugs. She just did not know how to approach or deal with Shino, though she imagined that he would be very easy and respectful to get along with and teach. Her greatest challenge came in the form of her last student, Naruto, the son of the accursed snake Sannin of Konoha. She actually knew less about Naruto than the Aburame boy. Not that much about him could be known. She had heard nothing about this boy until she was assigned him. It wasn't really fair to either of them. What was worse was how Anko had felt about the situation, seeing as how she became branded by the snake Sannin when she was a kid. Anko had been one of the first to actually find out about Naruto when he was younger. She didn't know how to feel about him, but she felt a special link to the boy. Both had been abandoned by Orochimaru. Soon Kurenai heard the shuffle of rushing feet coming towards her. She opened her eyes to see her three genin keeled over and breathing harshly. Well, Shino and Hinata were. Naruto was breathing heavy, but he looked as though he could run some more if he needed to. At least now she knew which ones were in good shape and which weren't. Glad to see you all made it in time. She smiled again at the group who had mostly recovered. Now you all may have passed the genin exam, but that is more or less just a qualifying test for the real test. Since we will be a tracking team, that is what our test will be over. You have exactly 2 hours to find my trail, follow it without me knowing, and catch me. Good luck. Again the blasted wind picked up and Kurenai was once again gone from all sight and sound. Shino was the first to act and sent a bug over to where she was standing. The small shift in his posture let Hinata know that something was wrong. Silently the girl ran through a few signs and activated her eyes. She frowned when the world around her became much more visible. Kurenai-sensei has left no trail at all. At least none that my bugs can detect, Shino stated flatly, though that was to be expected. She is a jonin after all. I can't find her chakra source with my eyes anywhere near us. Hinata meekly threw out, again to be expected. Naruto walked up to where she was standing and took a knee at the spot. The Sandame had taught him how to hunt for people before, if only a little bit, and from her footprint he could honestly say, I have no clue where she went. Naruto admitted sheepishly. Hinata and Shino's sweat dropped at the admission. He sighed and stood up and turned to his new team. I suggest we search this area first. Maybe she made it easy on us? he asked with a smile and shrug of his shoulders. Wordlessly the group took off into the forest surrounding the clearing and began to search for any clue their sensei might have left behind for them to find. They hopped from tree to tree and branch to branch, each of them looking around with their special abilities. Shino spread his bugs all throughout the forest and had them looking for anything that could relate to Kurenai's scent. Hinata used her eyes to ferret out any kind of lingering chakra that may have been left. Naruto used what tracking skills he had to find if anything looked out of place or broken that may have indicated that she had passed through here. It actually took them several laps around the training ground before anything was found. Naruto broke formation and landed next to a twig that had been freshly broken by the looks of it. He picked up an end of the broken stick and held it in the light. The wood was a light brown, something more akin to a tan. She's been through here. Both Shino and Hinata shared a look when they stopped on the branch above him. Perhaps the boy had gone crazy from not finding anything and suffered from wishful thinking. How can you be certain? Shino drawled out above Naruto. The boy turned around and looked at his teammate, his green silted eyes shining in the light that reflected from them. Hinata swallowed slightly at the strange eyes, not that she had any ground to stand on in that regard. This twig was just broken. The wood is not stained or darkened. It is compressed, meaning that someone stepped on it to force it to break. Shino mulled that over in his head. It did make sense, but why would she be all the way out here? And where did she teleport to? Naruto took off in the direction of the starting location with zeal. Shino and Hinata followed, interested in what he may be on to. When Naruto arrived at the spot he frowned. They had missed something. There were footprints leading from the spot into the forest. It figures we didn't see it. We were looking for chakra and not actual tracks. He followed the trail with his eyes. That would make sense. Shino added in and followed Naruto as he walked into the forest. I'm sorry. Hinata looked down ashamed. She should have been able to see those, she thought. Her father would be very upset with her if he found out that they had missed such an obvious clue. Naruto looked back with a small smile, barely noticeable by anyone without perfect eyes. Don't beat yourself up over it, Hinata, was all he said before facing front. Hinata blinked at him. It wasn't a compliment but more of a command. His voice wasn't its usual bored tone but had the slightest hint of emotion to it. Naruto smirked to himself. Maybe this making bonds thing would be easier than he thought it would. All it would take is a smile and not yell at them when they made a mistake. Kinda like the old man did with him. He took off into the forest and followed the tracks with haste. Soon the three of them were bearing down upon her. The tracks became fresher and fresher the faster they went. It wasn't long until the two others called out their respective traits and found her. Found her, dead ahead. Hinata called out, the veins on the side of her head pushed to their limit with the influx of chakra. Her scent is near, Shino stated just loud enough to be heard by his teammates. Naruto nodded and began looking around. For a while the tracks ran dead and he could see nothing that may point him in the right direction. The three of them stopped moving on a branch. Each of them had a frown on their faces. They had indeed found her. All three of her, in fact. It's not a genjutsu. Those are three real copies of her. Shino frowned deeper. He had heard of something like this but hadn't expected it to be used on him. Shino is right, Hinata added. Her eyes could see their chakra network, if only barely, and each of them had the same chakra and the same amount. If it was a clone she would have seen through that and could have pointed out the real one. Three looked to each other. We can't split up, Naruto said, earning incredulous looks in return. He sighed, pinching his nose bridge in response. Think about it, we are genin. We would have slim to none chance of fighting her as a 3-on-1. In what universe could we hold our own on a 1-on-1? He finished gruffly. Shino and Hinata could see the logic in that. Even if the copies were only a third of her power, it would still be more than enough to take all of them out without a second glance. Shino moved closer so as to speak quieter. So then what do we do? Hinata nodded in agreement and moved closer, despite her awkwardness. Naruto lowered his head and thought. He had a good brain when it came to these kinds of things, figuring out how to do things, that is. It took him a few moments, but he had come up with a simple solution. Naruto knelt and motioned for the others to do the same. Shino, I need your bugs to silently latch onto all three of them and begin to drain their chakra. If they are clones, then eventually they will disperse. Shino nodded and sent the command to his bugs. Hinata, in the meantime, I need you to watch with your Byakugan to see which chakra network is least affected by the bugs. That will be our Kurenai-sensei. Hinata did as she was told. Naruto, Hinata, and Shino all stood and waited for the work to be done. It was hard enough to coordinate with the bugs while they were away from the body, but getting them all in place and in action took some time and concentration on Shino's part. Eventually, though, the bugs did move into position and began their task. Hinata watched careful at the systems of each of the copies. Her eyes glared harshly at each body, waiting for it to waver in any way. It took a second or so, but soon she saw Kurenai. Over there, she whispered and pointed toward the Kurenai furthest from them. The group wordlessly took off and began their hunt of their sensei. Kurenai knew that her game had been played and that they were now on her trail. She turned to run but was surprised when a large wall of earth rose up in front of her. Soon Naruto landed atop the wall with a victorious smirk. "Why are you so happy? A little wall can't stop me," Kurenai added. Naruto's smirk only grew wider. "True, but what of the bugs? You may be able to outrun all of us, but in the end we would find you. What if I just crushed them?" Shino frowned at his sensei's words. He decided to step up and make his presence known. "That would be your only option, Kurenai-sensei. Only issue is that they are on your skin, on your torso and legs. You would have to remove your clothes. Of course this would happen after you got away. You could go to your house and change in peace, but now I have your scent. My insects could track you all over Konoha. Add to that Hinata and her eyes." Shino finished and pushed his glasses back up to his face. Kurenai resisted the urge to smirk in pride of her students. They had thought some of this through and landed in a very viable path that she would take. She would most certainly not be stripping in public, so her home would have to do. They could follow her in the meantime and catch her again. Then there was Hinata. Any genjutsu she used would be seen through. Not to mention Naruto. Despite his appearance, the boy knew a thing or two about avoiding or finding people and predicting the paths of people. A series of beatings had taught him that. She had little doubt he would not rest until he caught her. Kurenai did the only thing she could at this time, with all of her exits cut off. She relaxed and began clapping. "Very good, all three of you. I am glad that you managed to keep faith and find me. I am a little disappointed that you all could not see through the illusion in the beginning, but that is expected. Shino, I am very pleased with your use of your companions. Due to your efforts you managed to keep a constant sensor in this area and were ready for anything that may move through here. If it weren't for you, then they may not have found out which was the real me." Shino nodded at his sensei's words, a slight pleased buzzing coming from his body. Kurenai turned to Hinata. "Hinata, I am proud of the way you handled yourself during this session. You followed your teammates and helped when you could. You helped point them in the right direction every time they needed it. On top of it all, it was thanks to you that the others knew which was me and could take action before I vanished again." Hinata's face reddened to something similar to a tomato. Kurenai turned to Naruto, who had just descended his wall of earth to land in between his teammates. "And last but not least, Naruto. Good job on not being overly reliant on any special traits. You were able to point out a physical trail when no other trails were visible due to my concealment technique. Thanks to your simple tracking methods, you were able to give hope and chance to the group and keep them going. Also, your planing with your teammates is a wonderful trait to have, and you managed to cut off my escape route with your jutsu." Kurenai finished with a smile. Naruto beamed with pride at being praised. He rarely got praised and enjoyed every second of it when it happened. "Of course I could have just taken you all down anyway," Kurenai mused to herself, causing the three to frown and pale. "But that wasn't the point. Go home and rest. Tomorrow we start training as Team 8. She smiled softly and, once again, vanished away in a swirl of leaves. Naruto silently made a promise to himself to learn that jutsu and use it all the time. "Good teamwork. I will see you both tomorrow," Shino said as he turned and left the clearing. "Same," Naruto said lazily, making his way back to village, then his home. Hinata simply blushed at the compliment from her teammate and hastily made her way home to her dad to share the news. In the trees above Team 8, Kurenai appeared on a tree branch right next to another body. Her and the person next to her watched as the three genin left the woods. Kurenai looked over to see a tan face stuck in a frowning position. This slightly worried Kurenai. "What's wrong?" the ruby-eyed genjutsu mistress asked her companion. "Nothing. That's the problem. He is exactly like his father. Smart, cunning, a leader. The person trailed off. Anko, Kurenai said softly. Anko tore her vision off of the retreating form of Naruto to look at her friend. He isn't Orochimaru. He isn't anything like his father in terms of personality. Anko frowned, some of her purple hair falling over her face and chocolate-colored eyes. Yet you mean, remember Orochimaru was one of us for the longest time. Just wait. Anko spoke darkly. Kurenai frowned deeply at her. Couldn't she see past that? He is the son and not the man himself. Orochimaru deserved the hate, not this innocent little boy who has to pay for the sins of his father. Anko, don't be like that. You two are connected. Anko looked up in confusion at her friend. Kurenai smiled softly in return. Think about it, Anko. Both of you were abandoned by Orochimaru and are forced to bear his sins. You and that little boy both. Anko frowned the more she thought about it. Kurenai was right. She was always right after all. Her and Naruto suffered from a similar past involving the same man. That much was certain. Anko just could not shake the hate she had for the boy at the moment. He looked way too much like his father for her to get along with him now. Wordlessly, Anko hopped down from the tree branch and vanished away from sight. Kurenai watched her friend run away with a sigh. Anko always had a hard time dealing with her emotions, and it looks like this event brought up some very unwanted ones. Either way, Kurenai had to get back to her house. She had a training regime to plan. With Naruto, if there was one thing that Naruto couldn't stand, it would be walking down the street and getting glared at. Especially when he had no clue what he had done to earn such hate from everyone. Even the little kids glared at him. The Sandaime told him not to worry about it, but this was quickly becoming too much for him to handle. He had to figure out the reason today. Even if he didn't like the answer, he had to do it. Setting his face in a fixture of renewed vigor, Naruto took off down the streets that lead to his house. As he went by, he couldn't help but frown at the condition of the houses. Every few blocks the housing conditions dropped. Pretty soon Naruto entered the worst part of Konoha and his home, the slums. Now it wasn't anything like one may think. These houses still existed in Konoha and as such had to be upheld to a certain degree. At least on the outside. From the outside, all the houses looked good enough to be able to support a person to two. Seemingly a good place to live. It's when someone looked underneath that all sorts of problems arose. This area just so happened to house most of the social outcasts and less desirable of society. Many disgraced shinobi and alcoholics live here. Then there was Naruto. He lived all the way in the back, at the very edge of Konoha. Completely isolated from human contact and any signs of life. In fact, if someone were trying to find him and were not told of where he lived, they would never find him. Naruto hated living out here, but it worked for now, so he would accept it. When Naruto got into his home, he was a touch surprised. Sitting in his living room was the Sandaime. While him being in Naruto's house wasn't all that strange, it was the timing that surprised him a bit. Normally the old man would stop at least once a week, and since he had just seen him not 2 days ago, it was odd. But Naruto didn't mind. He had a few questions that he wanted answers to, and he knew that Hiruzen knew the answers. "Hello Naruto. How did your day go?" the elderly man asked with a smile. Naruto frowned slightly before letting a short sigh leave his lips. No use in blowing his question off. "It went good. I met my team and we passed our test," Naruto said, a slight tinge of excitement and joy in his voice. "Tomorrow we start training as a team." Sarutobi smiled. He remembered his own days with training as a team and all the joyful experiences it brought. He hoped it would affect Naruto the same way. "Do you like your team?" Hiruzen asked plainly. Naruto put a finger to his chin in mock thought before answering. "Well, Shino is kinda quiet but extremely useful with his insect things. Hinata is really shy, but her eyes can see almost anything and everything. Kinda wish I had something like that," Naruto sheepishly admitted. Sarutobi smiled but had other thoughts behind the smile. To the ex-Hokage, it seemed Naruto saw people as things to be used. A side effect of his childhood for sure. That, and he hadn't had a lot of human contact before in his life. Team 8 would be just what was needed for him to grow. "Well, sounds like you have a good team. What of your sensei? Kurenai sensei? She's okay, I guess. Really smart and kind. She had red eyes kinda like the Uchiha do, but without those little black dots. And she is really good at hiding." He added emphasis to the last part. She had impressed him with how she had been able to hide that whole time and never even make a sound. Well, she is a Jonin for a reason, Naruto. The old man laughed and Naruto chuckled along with him before his face took a more serious look upon it. Old man, why do the people look at me with hate? The boy asked in complete seriousness with a face so cold it could freeze the whole house if he wanted it to. Hiruzen opened his mouth to protest but found that he lacked the will to deny the boy. Naruto, know that I can't outright tell you the truth. The Hokage had made it a law that I couldn't tell you, but I can make you a deal. Naruto's eyes were the picture of concentration as the Sandaime spoke. The law states I can't tell you until you become a Chunin. But I will let you know if you make it to the second round of the exams. Naruto frowned. The exams are still several months away. You are really going to force me to wait that long? He waited a few moments and nothing but silence followed after showing that the Sandaime would not spill a single word. Can you at least tell me something about them? My family, I mean. Hiruzen thought about. No harm could come from giving Naruto some peace of mind about his family. Naruto, your father was a wonderful shinobi. A genius of intellect and a prodigy with ninjutsu. Naruto frowned after hearing that. Does that mean he is dead? The pale, green silted-eyed boy asked. Hiruzen stood up and made his way to the door before turning around with a smile. I never said that. Maybe you will meet him one day. Hiruzen said before shutting the door. Naruto couldn't fight off the huge grin that threatened to split his face at those words. His father had set an example of excellence for him to compete against and Naruto would be damned to lose. He would make his shinobi father proud and he meant nothing, would be getting in his way. Though I hope you never do. Hiruzen thought sadly as he walked away. If those two ever did meet, then Sarutobi ran the risk of Naruto falling down the same path. Orochimaru could be one very persuasive person when he wanted to be. And Naruto was still a very impressionable child who needed a parent figure in his life. And God knows that this world could not handle another Orochimaru. Not to mention a younger, more intelligent one. Please God, never let them meet, for I fear it would spell destruction for many lives. Naruto groggily walked to the training ground where his team resided. The reason for his lateness being that he had stayed awake all night thinking about how awesome of a shinobi his father had to have been for the old man to praise him so much. Of course, this eventually led to the thought of abandonment by his father, and that had caused Naruto to slip into a slight depression and result in staying up all night. Though Naruto was exhausted, he was not about to slouch or let anyone take pity on him. The Sandaime put his faith in Naruto and he would not let the old man down. Plus now he had a team that was counting on him as well and he wouldn't let them down. He smiled softly at that thought. He wondered if this was what it was like to have friends and people that cared. If this is what it felt like, then he would do his best not to let that go and to protect them if necessary. Not to say that Naruto liked them yet. He was just happy they tolerated him and in turn he would tolerate them. Needless to say that when Naruto had finally arrived, 40 minutes late, that Kurenai saw fit to give him an earful at that exact moment. Well, look who decided to join us. Kurenai began in a very motherly-like tone. Honestly, your second day with your team and this is how you show up. Not only are you late, but you look like you haven't slept at all. Imagine how your team feels, knowing that you may or may not save them because you didn't arrive on time. And she went on and on and on. It wasn't until Naruto shot her a glare that looked exactly like a green-eyed version of something Orochimaru would do. Luckily for her, he sighed deeply, realizing his mistake. I am sorry, Kurenai-sensei. I promise it will not happen again. This caused Kurenai to blink. Naruto turned to Hinata and Shino with a slight bow. I am sorry to you both as well. Hinata blushed slightly at the respectful and formal nature Naruto was suddenly taking. Her and Shino had both seen the glare and mentally agreed they never wanted to be on the receiving end of one of those. Shino pushed up his glasses before responding. I will take you at your word, Naruto. Naruto nodded to the Aburame before looking to Hinata. She merely nodded at Naruto and he took that as a sign that she also took him at his word. Yes, well, do not let it become a habit. I can understand a few times but not constantly. We have enough lazy people in this village already. She said off-handedly, thinking of a certain Shadow Clan and a one-eyed Jonin. Anyway, today we are having our first team training session. I will assign you 3 a regime and you will follow it. After that we will get together to rest and talk for a bonding experience. After that there will be more training, then I will release you for the day. The three genin nodded at their sensei. Kurenai smiled and formed two perfect cage bushins. She whispered instructions to them and let them go and grab their students. The clones had taken Hinata and Shino. Thus the real Kurenai took Naruto. They walked a few feet until they got to a tall tree. The ruby-eyed woman turned around to face Naruto. "Naruto, have you done this yet? The tree climbing exercise?" Kurenai asked in a questioning voice. Naruto looked at the tree and smiled. Yup. To prove his point, Naruto walked over to the tree and dashed up it. His training sessions on the tree to improve his speed did wonders for his chakra control. Not to mention his physical speed. Put the two together and he was able to ascend and descend the tree rather quickly. Kurenai smiled physical. Mentally she had wondered where the boy had learned to do such a thing. She knew for a fact that it wasn't taught in the academy. She also knew that this boy lived alone his whole life and never even attended the academy, so how would he know what to do? "Very good, Naruto. I had planned to start you on this so I could gauge your skills, but it looks like I will have to move on to plan B." Admittedly, Kurenai wanted to train Naruto herself. She hadn't been told a single thing about his abilities. Just that he had beaten the Uchiha single-handedly. "Plan B?" Naruto asked curiously. It was then that Kurenai gave him a sickeningly sweet smile as she pulled out a small whistle. "Oh yes." She blew the whistle as hard as she could. "Now run," she yelled. Startled, Naruto took off and began running around the training ground with Kurenai right on his heels. Every time Naruto would think about slowing down, she would cast a genjutsu to scare him and force him to keep running. "You're crazy," Naruto yelled through labored breath. When he turned around to look at his sensei, he was awarded with the sight of a tri-horned demon with bursting muscles chasing him. Ah! Hinata looked toward the direction of his teammate with a face of worry. Not 2 seconds ago she had heard Naruto scream loudly like he was in danger. Hinata was about to move to go see what was going on when the cage bushin of Kurenai appeared. "Where are you going, Hinata?" Cage Kurenai asked the curious little girl in front of her. Hinata gripped her tan sweater tighter and brought her hands up to her face. "I thought Naruto just screamed." The clone smiled at the girl. "I'm sure he did. Now get back to training. That tree won't climb itself." Shino paused on his tree. He had moved about halfway up the tree when he had heard the pale boy scream. A part of him thought that it could be nothing. Another part of him thought that the most logical explanation would be that Kurenai's sensei had done something to him. Just then an insect the size of a pebble landed on his nose bridge. This bug in particular was a tracker. He would place it on something or someone and it would radiate a signal he could pick on and interpret. This bug had been on Naruto. Chakra. Disturbed. Female. Chasing. The insect relayed his information. They couldn't really carry a lot of information, but Shino caught the gist of the story. Kurenai was chasing Naruto and had placed him under a genjutsu to keep him motivated. Clever. He whispered to himself and continued to climb the tree. Several hours of training had gone by and the rookies of Team 8 were completely exhausted. Naruto had spent all morning being chased by all kinds of nightmarish creatures, and Kurenai. Hinata spent her time by working on getting up and down the tree she was assigned as quickly as she could. Shino did his training by simply sticking to the tree and slowly walking up and down, fighting gravity all the while. Kurenai appeared before the group with a smile. The 3 kids were laying down, sprawled out in the grass. "Come on, sit up. I brought us all lunches," she said cheerfully. Soon, one by one, the 3 got up into a sitting position. All of them looked a mere second away from passing out. Ah, the first day of training. She sat down in deep thought, remembering her own first day with her team. But she lost her smile when she remembered that she was the only one left alive from her group. Shaking her head, she handed out the boxes of food to each person. Each of them scarfed down their food with little regard. "Well," Kurenai said as she watched them all finish their food, "why don't we start with how your day went yesterday?" She asked them and watched their reactions. Shino seemed to tense up ever so slightly. Hinata instantly looked away and Naruto let a small smile creep onto his face. "I will start, then we will go to Shino, then Hinata, and finally Naruto," she said with a smile. "I did nothing interesting or anything that I could tell you all about." The 3 genin, even Shino, face faulted. Though it was true. They didn't need to know that she had spent all night convincing Anko not to hate the boy, then spending the rest with Asuma. That was informative, Shino said with obvious sarcasm in his voice. I informed my clan that I had been placed on a team with Hyuga Hinata, the heiress of her clan, and Naruto. Upon speaking of the latter's name, I received many strange looks for a moment before they looked away. When I had confronted my father of the ordeal, he had said nothing but to keep an eye on the boy. Shino stated plainly. He saw no reason to hide anything. He needed to build trust with them as they would be watching his back. Kurenai nodded grimly. She knew exactly why he would have gotten those looks, but she couldn't say a thing. The law the third had passed made it forbidden to talk about with anyone. Even other people who knew about it. Well, I am glad they were accepting of your new status. Shino nodded again. How about you, Hinata? The Hyuga's face instantly fell into one of despair when she thought of previous night. Flashback. The excited Hinata quickly walked back home. Surely Hiyashi, her father, would be happy that she had passed the test but also landed on a team with an Aburame. She gave the guards a brief nod when she passed them. They smiled at her and let her through without any troubles. The Branch family did love Hinata dearly, even more so than her own family had. She had never acted like a main house member, never used the cage bird seal on them. Heck, she never even glared at them. But sadly there was little they could do for her but be kind to her when they could. When Hinata entered the house, her cousin, Neji, was there and waiting for her. A deep scowl on his pale features. Lady Hinata, Lord Hiyashi wishes to see you in her chambers this very moment. His tone was cold and emotionless as always. For as long as Hinata could remember, Neji had been very spiteful towards Hinata and took any chance he could get to make her life hell on earth. Thank you, Neji. I will go see him now, she said, trying to present an air of confidence from her body. Neji scoffed at her before storming away. She sighed one last time before building up her nerves to go face her father. Stepping around the wooden corner of her family's compound, she saw the silhouette of her father standing in his office, looking over the courtyard. Hinata sheepishly knocked on the door just loud enough to be heard on the other side. I was told by Neji you wanted to see me? She spoke quietly, almost to the point of silence, but Hiyashi heard. Hiyashi heard everything that went on in the clan, both inside the compound and out. He was silent for a few moments before responding. Did you pass? He asked abruptly, seemingly breaking the silence between the two. Yes, I did. I have been placed in Team 8. Hinata mentally jumped for joy. She had yet to stutter or waver in her father's presence. Of course his back was to her and he hadn't really spoken anything yet, but still. Team 8, her father mused to himself. Led by Kurenai, if I am not mistaken. Hinata nodded at this. Not that Hiyashi would see her anything like that. And who are your teammates? He asked, finally gracing her by turning around and focusing on her. Aburame Shino A and NN Naruto. She cursed at herself mentally for her stuttering. Even more so when her father frowned at her for it. The Aburame I approve of. If Shino grows to be anything like his father, then he will be a skilled shinobi. As for the Naruto boy. Hiyashi paused as a scowl crept onto his face, making himself seem older than he already was. I do not approve of him. Be cautious around him, Hinata. If you start noticing weird behavior, tell me. Sadly, I am not Hokage or I would have you moved from that team. Hinata wanted to ask her father why he had been so dead set against Naruto. She had met the boy for the first time today and he seemed to be a kind enough person. A little strange and lacking people skills, but she couldn't judge him in that department. Every time she got around Mino, the Yondaimi's son, she passed out for God's sake. Why, yes, father. She bowed to him, accepting his terms. You are dismissed till dinner. Congratulations on passing, he said in his usual drawl. Hinata couldn't help but swell with pride at hearing that. That was the first time he had given her any type of encouragement in over 5 years. Bowing once more, she left the roof silently. She practically floated through the compound. Hinata glowed brighter than she ever had in a long time since her mother was alive. When she entered her room, she jumped on the bed and screamed into her pillow. In short, she was on cloud 9. One thing did bring her out of such a stupor. Why did Hiyashi hate Naruto? No matter how many times she thought of it, she could not understand it in the slightest. But for now she was tired and would sleep on the subject. She laid down and closed her eyes as sleep found her. Flashback end. Hinata snapped out of her memory lane trip and blushed when she realized she had zoned out in reality. My father was happy to hear about my team. He even congratulated me. Kurenai had to fight back a look of surprise on her face. She knew of Hiyashi very well. And she did not like him in the slightest. I am very happy to hear that, Hinata. Kurenai exclaimed happily, causing Shino and Naruto to raise a brow at that. That seemed a little too enthusiastic for something as small as a "good job" comment. And last but certainly not least, Naruto. The pale boy leaned his head forward and smiled slightly, not that anyone could see it as his hair had moved in the way. He raised his head with a neutral face. Well, not much happened. I went home and spoke to the old man about joining. He was happy that I had been put on a team with you, Kurenai-sensei, and that I was getting along with my teammates. Then he told me about my father somewhat. Kurenai paled slightly at that. Not that the others noticed as their attention was put on Naruto. What did you learn of your father? She asked carefully. Hopefully this old man didn't say who exactly his father was, and judging by the look on Naruto's face, he hadn't. He didn't tell me much. Just that he was a great genius shinobi and that he is still alive. I hope I get to meet him one day. I still have so many questions, but the old man won't tell me any more. He left out their deal about the Chunin exams. He wouldn't dare pressure them into it. Plus they performed better if by their free will and drive. Kurenai mentally breathed a sigh of relief. Whoever it was appeared to be a smart man and a cunning man at that. Technically what was said wasn't a lie. Orochimaru really was and is a genius prodigy, and he is still very much alive and active. Though Kurenai knew that for them to meet would spell a disaster. At least not while was still impressionable. That is very nice to hear, Naruto. Maybe one day you will find him. She stopped when she thought of something. Naruto, who is this old man? She asked seriously. What if someone was leaking information about the village or something? Oh, just the Sandame. Sarutobi Hiruzen is what other people call him. I just call him old man or grandpa. The other three members of Team 8 face faulted at the casualness that Naruto took with the elderly Hokage. Kurenai actually felt a little stupid for letting that pass her head. Makes sense. She grumbled, causing Naruto to raise a brow. Anyway, you guys have another 30 minutes to rest. I hope you use it, she said before puffing away in a cloud of smoke. The three genin looked to each other before falling backwards and passing out. With Kurenai had teleported to the home of the Sarutobi clan as she had done many times before. This though she was not here for a clandestine meeting with Asuma. One that might result in a night of passionate. She blushed at her thoughts before deciding to seek out the leader of the Sarutobi clan. She roamed through the halls for a few minutes before eventually finding the correct door. She gave the door a slight knock. Come in, she heard the elderly voice call out. When she opened the door she was surprised to say the least. The place looked exactly like the office in the Hokage Tower. The ex-Hokage sheepishly rubbed the back of his head at her expression. I kinda miss the place. I can tell, she said absent-mindedly before shaking her head to clear her thoughts. So Naruto told me you told him somewhat of his father? She asked seriously. She had a right to know these things, damn it, and nothing was going to stop her from finding out. Sarutobi sighed slightly. Troublesome situation. He mumbled under his breath. Yes, I informed Naruto that his father was a genius and a very skilled shinobi. And that he was still alive. Nothing more. Kurenai was again relieved. Not that she didn't believe Naruto. She just wanted to double check. Should we tell him? I know it's not the best idea, but if he were to find out any other way, then he may hate us for lying to him. Hiruzen pondered this for a moment, smoking his pipe. She had a point, though the odds of him finding out from an outside source was very unlikely. You made a good point, but no. If he were to find out and research who Orochimaru is, he may discover that he is disgusted with that and fall into a deep depression, or worse, he may try to reach out to the man. Kurenai nodded. She believed that honesty would be the best option in this case, but decided to believe in the wisdom of the Sandame. And if he asks me about him? A very real possibility born from curiosity if nothing else. Tell him that the Chunin exams are coming up if he asks. He should get the meaning and remain silent. The elderly man smiled, making Kurenai wonder what the Hokage had up his sleeve. What are you planning, old man? She said the last part with emphasis. The Hokage blushed slightly at the familiar nickname. He explained that to you, huh? Sheepishly rubbing the back of his head. Kurenai nodded with a giggle. Yes, he did. He seems rather fond of you. The elderly Kage smiled. I suppose he would. I am really the only one who was ever there for him. After every beating, stabbing, mugging. After every training sessions and all the questions that followed after. He reminds me so much of how innocent Orochimaru was before the death of his parents. I really do care for him. Kurenai couldn't help but to smile before she looked at the time. I am sorry Lord Third, but I really must be getting back to my team. They should be waking up very soon. Hiruzen laughed heartily at that. Working them hard, eh? The ruby-eyed woman smiled, her pearly white teeth brightening up the room. Of course, it is a Jonin's job to make sure their team is prepared for all sorts of events. Sarutobi waved his hand in the air. True enough. And when he opened his eyes she was gone, a pile of dust in her spot. Hiruzen sighed to himself when he pulled out his small crystal ball. Let's see how the second round goes. Training Ground 8. When Kurenai arrived she had pulled out a little can with a red horn on top of it. Kurenai smirked at her devious idea of how to wake them up. She mentally counted down. 1, 2, 3, now. She pushed on the horn causing a loud high-pitched noise to pierce the still air. She could have fallen over and laughed at the reactions she got from the three. Hinata's eyes shot open and she launched her body straight up in the air and latched onto the tree limb directly above her. Much like a cat would when scared. Shino instantly let his bugs out to cover his body entirely so that he was nothing more than a black mass. All just to block out that damnable sound. Naruto had leapt backwards and somehow managed to form an earth wall in front of himself despite still being asleep. Now that you are all awake and chipper, it's time to train again. Kurenai spoke swiftly as more clones appeared and took their charges away. Once again Naruto was left with the real sensei. This was something he desperately did not want. More lap sensei? He asked nervously. Kurenai gave him a wicked smile in return. Oh no. The laps were to test your general speed and endurance. Next we need to test muscle strength. So push-ups it is. She pulled out her whistle and blew into it. Go go go. Naruto groaned and began his series of push-ups. Hiruzen watched the scene with a smile. It seemed that this group was going to get along rather well. 2 months later, Team 8 had continued with their various training sessions for a little over 2 months. To say that they were grueling and unforgiving would be an understatement. Each of them were worked to the bone and then some. Kurenai insisted that it was all in the form of being prepared. The genin didn't think so. Naruto was being driven to perform more physical tasks. The constant running of laps had done wonders for his ability in the speed and stamina department. Add on that he did constant series of push-ups and the boy was gaining strength quickly. Not to mention the chakra exercises. And Kurenai was deeply pleased by that. Naruto needed to become the front-line fighter of the group. A combination of ninjutsu and taijutsu. Hinata trained mostly in speed and chakra control. She was the eyes of the group, able to see or peer into anything that may be worth looking into. She did the tree climbing exercise regularly and even picked up the training style of Naruto. Namely running up and down the tree to build leg muscle and speed. Shino worked the most on his chakra control, capacity, and general toughness. He became, more or less, the feelers for the group. Able to sense anything that may come too close and to keep an eye on his comrades or enemies at all times. He used his enhanced control and capacity to better control his insects and to give them more complex instructions. Over the course of the 2 months the team had foregone the use of the afternoon for training. Instead they had picked up doing D-ranked missions to build up their shinobi profile. The genin found these missions to be nothing more than menial chores and tasks. They did everything from painting houses and fences, to cleaning up the local dog crap. The Inuzuka dogs were the worst. At least according to Naruto. On numerous occasions they had chased down a cat named Tora. This cat easily became their most hated chore. Damn thing had more than 9 lives. Eventually the group became beyond fed up with the chores and wanted a chance to prove themselves. A chance to show that they were ready to become full-fledged ninja. Not some labor force for the common good. In fact, that is where they were at the current moment. In front of Namikaze Minato, the Yondaime, for another mission. Lord Hokage. Kurenai bowed. Team 8 reporting for another mission. Minato looked up from his desk with a smile. He loved to see the will of fire in a team. Especially one as young as they are. Very well. What will it be today? The genin cringed at that. Silently they were hoping to get a higher ranked mission. Any D ranks left? And just like that, all their hope went straight down the drain. Yes. In fact, I think Tora needs to be captured again. If you want. Minato was cut off by a young but firm voice from behind Kurenai. I am sorry to interrupt Lord Hokage, but I believe that the team could handle a higher-ranked mission. Naruto stated politely. Minato immediately frowned and glared at the boy when he finished speaking. Oh? I was unaware that you were the sensei to the team. He responded coldly, causing Naruto to flinch. Kurenai mentally frowned. She had heard the rumor that these two did not get along. Well, more like Naruto did his best to be polite while Minato just outright hated him. Why though she could not understand. Of course I am not Lord Hokage. I am simply saying that from my standpoint, the team could handle something more. I meant no offense to you or Kurenai-sensei. Naruto said through barely contained rage. The fourth had always bared some kind of grudge against him. In fact, Naruto could remember all the times Minato had the Anbu appear and taken him to jail under the charge of disorderly conduct. That's what the public was told. When in private, Minato would openly tell Naruto that the only crime he had committed was being alive. It was only by the grace of the Sandaime that Naruto survived and got any peace in his life. HMPH. Anyway, in order for that to be true, I need the word of the sensei. Not some genin. He said the last word as if it could physically harm Naruto. Like he was saying the word monster or freak. Kurenai thought it over some before arriving at an answer. If Shino and Hinata both agree, then yes, I believe we are ready. Naruto, Minato and Kurenai turned to look at the aforementioned parties. I believe we are ready. Hinata declared proudly, albeit in a softer and quieter voice than normal. This is the most logically choice and thus I approve of it. We are needed to defend the village at some point, and gaining experience now would greatly assist in that task. Shino added, pushing up his glasses. Naruto happened to notice that he seemed to be doing that a lot. Very well. There is a mission here I think would do you all some good. Go out, see the sights, do a mission and return. They all nodded at the idea. It did seem nice after all. Very good. You will be going to Kusagakure and delivering a message to a team that will be arriving there from Kumogakure. You leave tomorrow. Kurenai accepted the scroll with a bow. Alright team, outside we go. The team wordlessly followed their sensei. Naruto couldn't help but cringe under the harsh glare that he was receiving from the Hokage. It kinda made him wonder who his son Mino would be teamed up with. You heard the Hokage. Rest up and meet at the front gate at 0600. And just like that, the damnable woman was gone in a swirl of leaves. Naruto let out a grunt of frustration. He hated when she did that. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Naruto said with a genuine smile and took off to go to his house. Over the 2 months he had become rather close with the others and even began trusting them with his life. For Naruto this was the highest level of respect, as only the old man had earned this kind of attention. While Naruto was leaping on the rooftops to his house, his stomach rumbled. It wasn't a strong one, but it was enough to let him know he needed something. So Naruto decided to stop at a dango stand to grab some of the snacks to take home and eat. Hey, he had earned a treat. When he got there though, he did not know exactly how to react to the scene. Inside the stand there sat a woman with a tan trench coat, a brown skirt and a mesh body armor. Her purple hair was pulled back in a wilder ponytail. She gave Naruto an eerie feeling in his chest from possible fear. But this is not what frightened him. No, what scared him was the rate at which this woman was downing dango. Stick after stick of the stuff vanished into that black pit of a mouth, and she never even seemed to slow down any. It took 15 brutal minutes of this before the woman was full. It was then that Naruto decided that he did not feel hungry anymore. What are you looking at, brat? The woman called out. Naruto looked around and realized he was the only one in the stand. Sadly, she was talking to him. Nothing. Just, how do you eat so much of that stuff? He admitted that curiosity had gotten the better of him. The woman just snorted indigently. Because dango is the best stuff in the world. Naruto's sweat dropped at that. I mean, it is good but not the best. A kunai flew past his face with dangerous speeds. Naruto narrowly managed to bend out of the way of the kunai, watching it with his eyes as it went. When his vision returned to the purple-haired lady, he cringed. The look on her face was pure murder. What did you say? She asked, deathly quiet. Naruto decided he was not about to be bullied by another shinobi for no other reason than speaking his mind. You heard me. He spoke while narrowing his eyes at her. The silted emerald eyes positively glowed at the woman. The two stayed dead locked with each other, neither of them blinking or moving. Several tense minutes went by before the lady smirked and leaned back in her chair. "You got balls, kid. What's your name?" Though she already knew. Anko had watched him for several weeks now, trying to find any reason to not trust him or any reason to prove he was just like his father. "Naruto. It's a pleasure to meet you, miss?" Naruto inquired about the crazy lady. "Me?" She feigned an insulted expression. "I am the Y and single Mitarashi Anko." Somehow banners behind her exploded in a show of smoke and confetti. The words written on the banners were the same she had just said. Both Naruto and the owner of the shop, who had listened in on the conversation, sweat dropped. "Okay then." He paused for a moment. "Well, I'll see you around then." He gave her a quick bow before leaving the snake mistress of Konoha alone. Anko watched him leave with very careful eyes. This had been more or less her final test for the kid. "Either you are a damn good actor or you really are nothing like that bastard," Anko thought to herself with a smile. Kurenai was actually kinda right. They were both alike in the fact that Orochimaru had abandoned both of them for other pursuits. Naruto flopped onto his bed after his cold shower. Not that he liked to take cold showers, but that's all that he had. The landlord here had turned off the hot water for him. Something about saving it for those who needed it. As he lay, he thought about his friends and sensei. Shino could be a touch quiet but was really helpful in a pinch due to the infernal bugs. Shino and Naruto had sparred before and most of the time Naruto won, but there was one time that Shino won by sucking all the chakra from his body and forcing him into submission. Hinata was probably the most troublesome of all. She could literally see everything that was thrown at her. Naruto couldn't hide from her or even attempt to block her vision. Any type of smoke and she just saw right through it. Not to mention that she was fast on her feet and her hands with her strikes. Sadly, it was never enough to beat Naruto. His mind just always found a way to beat her and Shino. Not to say they were bad fighters. Naruto was just better. He had developed a bit of a complex from his pride in his abilities. Kurenai did her best to keep his ego in check, but she was hard-pressed not to be proud of all three of the genin. Their training, combined with their clan training for Hinata and Shino, made them a well-oiled machine. She would never admit it, but she bragged to other jonin about her team. Anko herself grew interested in the team. More for Naruto, but she was actually impressed with the growth the other two showed as well. It seemed like every time he took a step ahead the other two would be right on his heels, pushing him to push himself harder. It seemed that Naruto had made true friends among those two. Perhaps the most proud of all would be the Sandaime. Naruto was quickly surpassing every expectation he had placed for him. He was making friends, training hard, working with his team and smiling more often now. Naruto had quickly proved that he was nothing like his father was at that age, and Hiruzen could not be more happy because of that. Naruto closed his eyes softly and fell into a light sleep. The possibility of excitement tomorrow kept him partial awake for the majority of the night. Outside Naruto's window, a man watched Naruto fall to sleep. His eyes kept keen focus on his sleeping form as if he could learn everything from just looking at him. The man's glasses reflected the moonlight, causing the glasses to glint. His purple high-collar shirt hid his lower face well but let his sliver hair shine in the light. Lord Orochimaru will want to know of this. Naruto opened his eyes only to come face to face with his worst enemy, the sun. The damn fiery orb of light just loved to beam him right in the eyes. Especially when he was having a rather pleasant dream about how cool his family must have been. He fought the beam of light for several minutes before finally conceding to the sun and getting up. "You win this time," he grumbled to no one in particular, rubbing the sleep from his eyes and letting a hearty yawn fill the silence of his home. He stretched happily till his eyes caught hold of his clock. "Ah!" he shouted. He had a grand total of 30 minutes to shower himself, pack his supplies, and meet his team. He sped out of his bed and cloths and hurried into the shower. He lathered on his soap and washed himself off. He dashed out of there naked as the day he was born. He threw on his outfit, which consisted of a black long-sleeve shirt, a dark sage green t-shirt over it. He wore the same colored sage green pants and shinobi pants. He hastily shoved all his gear inside of his pack and blasted out of the door, intent on not being late. He hopped from roof to roof, pushing his body to its limits in the rush to beat the time. His face became tight in concentration, his focus purely on the attempt to make it. Come on, don't be late, he berated himself as if it would make him go any faster. He actually smiled when the gates of Konoha came into view. Energy and emotion overwhelmed him at the last second. Yes, he shouted victoriously. At the gates, Kurenai tapped her foot impatiently against the floor. Naruto was running dangerously close to being late for the second time. Normally she would just give him a slight scolding and a slap on the wrist. That would be under normal conditions. This was not one of those times. Not only was this their first real mission, one that would vastly improve their record as a team and their renown, not that they were after that. But add to the fact the Yondaime had decided to personally see the team off on their first C-ranked mission added to the stress. Naruto will be late in 3, 2. Kurenai was cut off by a victorious shout. Yes, Team 8 and the Yondaime all looked in the direction of the shout. Kurenai could have face-palmed at the sight. It became quite obvious that Naruto had rushed his process by the look of his outfit upon arriving. Sorry, pant, Kurenai-sensei. Had to, pant, rush to get here. He bowed to his sensei before realizing the Yondaime was there as well. Sorry to you as well, Lord Hokage. He bowed to the Hokage as well. Kurenai was about to say that Naruto wasn't late by roughly 5 or so minutes when Minato cut her off. That is no excuse to wake up half of the village genin. And perhaps you need your training updated if you can find enough time to be lazy and show up whenever you feel like. He growled out, making Naruto cower under the man. Shino and Hinata both shivered silently at the way their teammate was being treated. Naruto backed away slowly as the memory of what had happened last time came to mind. Kurenai was about to speak up on Naruto's behalf when she sensed a presence coming to her. A rather calm and friendly chakra. Not to mention strong and vast. Not 2 seconds later the elderly Sandaime arrived with Asuma in tow. Asuma looked as though he was literally dragged out of his bed and brought here. Hiruzen gave the squad a bright smile that seemed to warm up the icy air the Yondaime had set before. Hello everyone. Hiruzen greeted them all. Yeah, good fuck. Sarutobi shot him a death glare, reminding him that there were still children in the area. Not to mention 2 ladies. Freaking morning, he grumbled out. The Sandaime smiled brightly at his son. Hello Hiruzen. Minato was the first call out. The Hokages exchanged head nods. Hiruzen could tell that Minato was displeased that he had shown up when he did, saving Naruto further berating. Ah, good morning Lord Sandaime. Hello to you too Asuma. Better keep good watch on that mouth of yours lest it get you in trouble later. Kurenai teased. Asuma blushed slightly and rubbed the back of his head, causing Minato, Hiruzen, Kurenai, and Hinata to chuckle, giggle. Shino didn't because he simply did not find it to be so funny. Naruto didn't because he didn't quite understand. He had no idea why his sensei's words had such a profound effect on the man. 1 second he was positively glowing with confidence and pride and the next he was blushing and had an aura of submission. Naruto would look into this more when he got a chance to do so. Pardon me Hiruzen, but may I ask why you are here? The aged looked up to his successor with a smile. Same reason you are Minato. I wanted to see the team off on its first serious mission. Minato frowned for a brief second. Every time him and Naruto got into a spat or anything of the sort the Sandaime would show up and act all innocent. Minato sometimes thought that maybe he was going too far when it came to Naruto, but then he remembered Kushina and would be re-motivated. Well, speaking of which, we really must be off. Wouldn't want the team from Kumo to be forced to wait on us. Kurenai said with a smile. Hinata paled slightly, even more than she normally looks, at the mention of Kumo. While it was true that relations had improved with them recently, Hinata still lived in fear of the nation. Of course Kurenai. Have a safe trip. The Sandaime spoke sincerely. Asuma and Minato nodded in agreement and the soon Team 8 was off to the land of grass to meet their contacts from Kumo. The genin of Team 8 all waved at the departing party that had gathered. Soon though the team was out of sight and hearing range. Minato looked to the Sandaime with a foul look. Why do you always do that? He asked with an icy tone. Hiruzen continued waving and staring at the backs of the group. Minato started getting upset that he wouldn't answer. Eventually though he did. Because your grudge against that boy is foolish. He has done nothing but be of service to the village. He started. The Yondaime already could feel his blood beginning to boil. What happened with Kushina? Don't you dare go there. She died because of that fiend. How many lives has he ruined other than mine? That man is the walking definition of evil. Pure, uncorrupted evil. Hiruzen looked away in shame. He had always felt that every death Orochimaru caused since he left the village had been his fault. All the pain and suffering Orochimaru caused weighed heavy on his heart. Perhaps the heaviest weight would be the death of Kushina, when Orochimaru caused the seal to break and the Kyuubi to be let free. The death and destruction the Kyuubi had caused to the village and its people were sky high. Not to mention the after effects of such an attack. Many were left with emotional scars that ran deep. Minato had secretly let the information that Orochimaru had caused it leak out from the council to the people. Needless to say, they were in an uproar by such a vile action. It was a smart move by Minato as it directed the hate away from his son and to the son of Orochimaru. Exactly. Remember Hiruzen, you won't be able to protect him forever. With that, Minato left the Sarutobi clan head and heir to mull over their thoughts. Hey dad, don't worry about him. Orochimaru is not your burden, Yano? I think the Lord Hokage went a bit overboard with that last comment. Asuma patted his father's shoulder, causing the elderly man to let a small smile hit his lips. It was a rare moment to see his son stand up for him. He knew Naruto would stand up for him if he could. That only made his smile grow bigger. With Team 8, the group had made excellent progress over the past few hours. Kuso was actually not that far away from the village. Just past the village jurisdiction, right on the outskirts of the forest. Right when grass met trees. It was here that the group decided to stop for a second. To catch their breath so they didn't look like complete vagabonds when meeting the other team. Hey, why are we stopping, Kurenai-sensei? Naruto asked in a slightly whiny voice. Kurenai sighed and tossed him a rag. Because we don't want to seem tired or weak in front of the other team. What if they decide to attack us? She inquired to Naruto and, by extension, the group. Shino was the first to come up with something to add to the conversation. Would they do that, Kurenai-sensei? What would they have to gain from such an action? Surely they know that they would damage the already weak alliance between our nations. Not to mention, I am sure their cage would be disappointed in them for their rash action. Shino inquired as logically as he could. His brain could not figure out why they might take aggressive action. Oh, and what if they plan on becoming missing nins? Or perhaps this is all just a setup to capture the Hyuga heiress again and give her to Kumo anyway? Naruto gulped. He had heard of the incident with Kumo, who hadn't, and he could honestly say he wouldn't want anyone to live like that. Much less a teammate. Hinata almost passed out on the spot. The only reason she had stayed standing was the looks that both of her teammates gave her. They weren't angry or one of pity for her being weak. No, they were ones of defense and determination to protect the Hyuga if it came to that. I won't let them harm her, Naruto said lowly. His voice had released some of the pent-up rage his body held from his treatment over the years. This made the air around him drop several degrees. All to show how serious he actually was. I concur with Naruto's statement. Shino added in with fire in his voice. Well, while I am happy to hear that we still have a few hours before the team gets here. Let's get cleaned up and get ready for them. We have 2 hours to spend, so be back here at the end of that and do not go into town yet. Kurenai informed them and they did as they were told. 2.5 hours later, Team 8 strolled into the boarding town casually. Kurenai led the group, putting a strong air of confidence around her. Hinata was to her left. The poor girl was doing her best to put on her strongest face so that the Kumo nin didn't think she was weak. Naruto walked to the right of Kurenai. He wanted to be up here to foresee any attempts on Hinata. Shino brought up the rear, planting bugs on the others so as to monitor them. Soon Naruto saw a team round the corner and start walking towards them. They were in a familiar formation as his team. The leader bringing up the front had a white bandana on while wearing the traditional Jonin attire of Kumo. His 3 genin were dressed in a black long-sleeve shirt with gray pants. Over the shirt was a small sleeveless jacket, signaling they were genin. Kurenai and the leader of the other stopped a good distance away from each other. Now that the Jonin of Kumo was closer, he could see that his face had a deep scar going through his face, starting from the left side of his jaw and going all the over his right eyes, which was grayed out. Naruto could say he felt uneasy around the man. You must be the team from Konoha, the man stated simply. His voice sounded like something one would hear from a smoker of 30 or so years. Very coarse and harsh. Yes, my name is Kurenai and this is my team. Shino, Naruto and Hinata. She pointed to each member when their names were called. Each of the genin stood proud when they were called. My name is Tarnki. These are my genin, Terakarshi, Maribi, and Kian. The now identified Tarnki said. He too pointed to each member. The first being Terakarshi. He was easily the tallest of the group, aside from their leader. He had a hammer on his back and slicked back orange hair. Maribi was up next, the female of the group. She had pale white hair that reached down to her shoulder blades. She had a small katana on her back held in by a strap. Lastly was Kian. He had his headband over his eyes with his brown hair falling over it. Nice to meet you all. She gave them a slight bow and motioned for her team to do the same. Which they did, except Naruto kept his head up and eyes on the kid who had his eyes covered. Likewise, Tarnki bowed with his team. Kian did the same as Naruto and kept his eyes locked on him. I have the scroll here if you have yours. Might as well get this over with so that we can head back home. I am sure you are a busy person. Kurenai tried to hurry things along. The look that Jonin was giving her was steadily making her feel uncomfortable. And if I wanted to play a bit first? He smiled devilishly, his team behind him getting into a defensive stance. Kurenai narrowed her eyes at the man and readied her chakra. The others picked up in this and assumed a fighting stance. I don't know about your team, but I know my team is not up for playing. Kurenai grounded out. Tarnki ran his hand through a scar on his face. A Hyuga gave me this and I want to pay a Hyuga back for it. Judging by the eyes on that one over there, she is a Hyuga. Hinata tensed heavily at this. Her legs were beginning to buckle from the killing intent Tarnki was releasing. Naruto couldn't stand that kind of talk towards a teammate. He had become very protective of his friends. You won't lay one hair on Hinata's head. At that declaration the entire group went into hostile mode. Terakarshi moved his meaty arm up to grip the handle of his hammer. Maribi put her hand on the katana and pulled it slightly out of the sheath. Kian assumed a very Juken-like stance, confusing the others. Hinata assumed the same stance as Kian, her pearl-white eyes blazing with activation. Naruto drew a kunai and poised his vision on Terakarshi. Shino let the air around him become filled with his chakra-draining insects. Kurenai made no outward movement but readied her chakra for a group genjutsu. Tarnki shared a hearty laugh. And who is gonna stop me? You? He jabbed at the pale boy. When Naruto looked back on this moment he still couldn't explain what caused him to do this, but he did. Naruto let his anger flow freely through his body. His eyes positively blazed at the man. Alas, that wasn't the worst. When Tarnki looked at Naruto's eyes, his shadow moved behind him. Out of the shadow came the one and only Snake Sannin, Orochimaru. The killing intent being blasted from Naruto landed solely on the scarred Jonin. The shadow disguised as Orochimaru licked his lips maliciously. Tarnki soon found himself gulping harshly to ease the stress. Why yeah, whatever. He is the scroll. He tossed it to Kurenai who, in return, tossed her own scroll to the man. What had Naruto done to cause such a turnaround in the man? As fast as they had arrived the Kumo team took their leave and left with haste. Safe travels. He spoke before he got too far away. Naruto, what did you say to the man? Kurenai's soft voice caused Naruto to snap from his anger-filled stupor and to look at his superior. He lowered his head slightly when he realized he had lost control of himself. His cheeks tinted red with shame. I'm sorry, Kurenai-sensei. I didn't mean to lose my temper. I just didn't like the way he was talking to Hinata. Kurenai's gaze softened on the boy. He truly had no idea what he did and, truth be told, neither did the rest of Team 8. It's okay, Naruto. Just please try and keep it under control for now. Naruto nodded. Kurenai turned to the rest of the group to address them. We are going to head back. No. She was cut off by a monkey-faced Anbu landed in front of her. I am sorry to interrupt, but I have an urgent message from the Yondaime. He requires that Team 8 move with haste to assist Team 7 with a mission that had just become ranked. Kurenai's eyes widened upon hearing that. No genin team should have to face an A-ranked mission. Especially not one so green. Inform the Hokage that we will be leaving at once. Where is the mission location? She inquired with haste. They had to get moving. Team 7 could be in danger. The monkey Anbu handed her a scroll. The Land of Waves. Several days later, Naruto was plain out exhausted. Kurenai had pushed them all to rush to their destination with speed and stamina they just did not have yet. Not to mention that Naruto had to carry Hinata for the last leg of the trip as the heiress was simply too tired to carry on without stumbling. Luckily Shino had managed to keep up. Naruto didn't think he could carry both of them. When they arrived at a tiny waterfront shack, Kurenai held up a hand and ordered them to stop. "We're here," she spoke softly as if the past few days of travel had no effect on her. Which in reality it hadn't. Using genjutsu as her primary attack style required her to be fast on her feet to avoid close-quarters fighting. Instantly the trio of genin collapsed on the dirt floor, each breathing hard and pale from the physical exertion. Kurenai looked back and felt a pang of regret in her heart. She had pushed them too hard in an attempt to save others. Ensure another team did not fall apart like hers had. "I'm sorry," was the last thing Naruto heard before letting the darkness claim his vision. The next day, when Naruto awoke, the first thing he noticed were his muscles. They were unbelievably sore and stiff. No doubt from the extensive running and physical strain the past few days have brought him. He slowly made his way out of the bed into a standing position. Well, more like a supported standing position. He had to rest an arm on the wooden chair that was next to him. His legs felt like pure jelly when he tried to apply even the smallest amount of pressure to them. It seemed like walking was out of the question for the day. Instead, Naruto simply turned around and sat in the wooden chair, too tired to really do anything. The chair creaked with confirmation of the action. He figured he would just wait for someone to come to him instead of screaming or shouting for help. While he waited, he took the time to look around the room. Obviously the room was not of a high standard, seeing as how the teal paint was chipping off the walls. The wooden floor creaked rather loudly whenever someone moved it, and the windows looks to be about 2 seconds away from shattering. Yes, Naruto was indeed in a very poor place. Or a well-placed genjutsu. Either way, it did not sit right with him. Before long his eyelids began to grow heavy and slowly began to fall to a close. And they would have if not for his sensei opening the door at the last moment. "Oh Naruto. Good, you're still awake. I came when I heard the floor creak to make sure you were okay," Kurenai asked in her best caretaker's voice. Naruto could easily tell that she was feeling guilty for her actions. His voice was very weakened compared to the normal strength it held. "I'm fine," Naruto said through a strained voice, causing Kurenai to wince as if she had been struck by a physical blow. He didn't intend for it to be a harmful statement. Her own guilt had done that to herself. "Well, I am going to do the same thing for you as I did the others. I know you must be so sore to the point where walking must hurt. I am going to heal your body as best as I can so you can at least move around today and train some tomorrow." Naruto could have jumped for joy at that moment. Alas, his body was far too mangled to do such an action. Within moments of her sentence, Kurenai floated over to Naruto. Her hands burst into green, soothing light that enveloped his body in a green cocoon. His body was soon put to ease from his aches and pains that had haunted him for the past 30 or so minutes. When she was done, she greeted Naruto with a smile, who eagerly returned it. "Thank you, Kurenai-sensei," the now healed boy declared proudly. "You are very welcome. Come to the living room whenever you are ready." And with that she left the pale child alone for the moment. Naruto sighed to himself before gingerly standing to test his leg strength. They managed to stand, albeit a bit shaky at first. He let out a grunt of frustration before walking out of the room. When Naruto entered the living room, he frowned deeply. The first time he had frowned so deeply in nearly 2 months. His vision first landed on Shino and Hinata, and some kid with a small dog were talking with a small boy who seemed to be crying about something. Kurenai was next to a lazy postured man with one eye. Then his eyes met his rival's eyes. Naruto locked eyes with Sasuke, who was seemingly ignoring a pink-haired girl next to him. The Uchiha held the same confident smirk that he normally held, but his eyes held something deeper. Something Naruto could relate to. Hate burned deep within his eyes. "So Sasuke, when we get back to the village, do you?" the pink-haired girl began before getting cut off. "Shut up, Sakura. You're annoying me," Sasuke said as he walked away. Naruto seethed with barely controlled rage as the Uchiha made his way towards, all the while holding that same smirk. If Team 8 learned anything about Naruto during his time, it was that he was very possessive and protective of his things. Teammates included, and seeing someone mistreat their teammates drove him mad. Sasuke stopped directly in front of Naruto with his arms crossed. Something wrong, idiot? The room went silent at that. Naruto could barely stop himself from shaking with disgust at the situation. Yeah, my problem is the way you treat your teammate over there, Naruto said through clenched teeth. Sasuke scoffed. I don't see how that is your problem. She is worthless and I will treat her as such. Much like you, idiot. By now both senseis were on their way to their star pupils, but Naruto was set. As fast as one might blink, Naruto popped Sasuke right in the nose with his closed fist. Sakura screamed at her hurt idol and Hinata gasped at her teammates' actions. Kiba yelled at Naruto and Shino analyzed the situation. Kurenai and Kakashi pulled the two genin apart. Naruto went silently while Sasuke held his gushing nose. Once Team 8 and Team 7 were separated, Team 8 decided to have a group talk. Team meeting everyone. All three genin perked up to listen to their sensei. We need to talk about what happened in there. Kurenai started out. She was about to continue her speech when Shino interrupted. Pardon me, sensei, but I do not believe we, or rather Naruto, did anything wrong. The way the Uchiha acted toward his pink-haired teammate was not acceptable among ninja. His attitude towards the shinobi world is in serious need of being improved, Shino said rather bluntly. Hinata nodded at her friend's statement. Naruto looked away, seeing as how this conversation was about his actions. Internally he was berating himself about his behavior. He had lost control again when his sensei had asked him to keep control on himself. What would the old man think if he was caught acting so rashly? Surely he would be upset with the boy. Is that how you feel as well, Hinata? Kurenai asked in a neutral and curious tone. The meek girl looked up at her sensei. It is Kurenai sensei. What Sasuke did was wrong and Naruto was right for standing up for her. Naruto for his part was moved. No one had ever so selflessly defended him with their words and creditability except the old man. Kurenai was about to speak when Kakashi decided to drop in on the situation. Yo! He greeted the group with a strange, eye smile. The Jonin stood lazily in his blue and green outfit. His head protector covered over one of his eyes, which made Naruto wonder if the man had lost his eye in some way. Hello, Kakashi. Is there a reason you are here? Kurenai asked the silver-haired man sternly. Kakashi sighed loudly, the stress of the situation beginning to hit him. I came to apologize for a Sasuke. See, we ran into the Demon Brothers and Zab. Uza Momochi. Yes, we know. We saw the report and that is the only reason we came here as fast as we did. Still, that alone is not reason enough for Sasuke to be berating his teammate and picking fights with Naruto here. Despite their history together, Kakashi nodded dumbly. I know and I agree with you. I talked with him about it, but he said the only way he would ever apologize is if Naruto and him fought. Kurenai looked at him like he had grew a second head. Do you have so little power and command of your genin that they can walk all over you like this? I swear, Kakashi, if I'll do it. Naruto spoke quietly. Kurenai stopped speaking to turn her vision to him. Are you sure, Naruto? You have to be exhausted and there is no need to stoke the Uchiha's ego. Kurenai pleaded with her student. I won't lose. With that, Naruto started walking back towards the house, to which there was a large clearing before the forest turned to beach. Sasuke was attempting to run up the tree. He would get about halfway up and fall straight back down. Team 8 plus Kakashi followed Naruto to oversee the match to ensure that no one got too injured. Sakura sat high up on her tree branch and cheered Sasuke on to get the rest of the way up the tree. Kiba and Sasuke seemed to be about tied when it came to progress. Hey Sasuke! Naruto called out, causing both boys and Sakura to look at the pale-skinned child. Are you crazy? I could have hurt myself. Kiba barked out. The little dog, Orochimaru, yipped in response. Naruto said nothing but kept walking towards Sasuke with a determined glare. That is, until Kiba got in his way. Hey, I'm talking to you. Kiba tried to punch Naruto in the jaw. Naruto simply danced around the punch and chopped Kiba in the neck, causing him to pass out. Sasuke smirked and began to walk towards Naruto. In one dash, Naruto had cleared the distance and tossed Sasuke against the tree he was climbing on. Sasuke let out a pained grunt and looked up. There was Naruto clinging to the tree above Sasuke without any exertion on his part. Still can't climb a tree, eh, Sasuke? The Uchiha growled fiercely and ran up the tree to try and get Naruto. The snake-like boy jumped off the tree just before Sasuke got to him. The Uchiha lost his focus and fell back down the tree, smacking his head off the tree on the way down, and landing flat on his back. A split second later a foot came crashing down on the young Uchiha's stomach, forcing all the air out of his lungs and doubling the impact. Soon Sasuke was gasping for air like a fish out of water. Kakashi was about to step in when Kurenai held out her hand and shook her head. Kakashi sighed. Sasuke was going to be mad at him later. Speaking of him, when he finally caught his breath back he stood up and glared at the boy. "I am an Uchiha. How dare you lay a hand on me?" Naruto scoffed while dodging wild fists from said Uchiha. Punches and kicks were thrown but Naruto just bobbed and weaves out of the way. Eventually Sasuke began to tire himself out. Naruto saw this and made his move. Dodging a right fist, Naruto slipped to his right side and let the Uchiha's jaw feel the power of his uppercut. Sasuke felt his whole world grow dark and cold before passing out. Naruto smirked at the fallen boy. Just because you have a name doesn't make you strong. Training and becoming strong, that is true strength. Naruto stalked away from the scene and went into the house. He quickly found the same room he was in before and sat in the chair. Kurenai was right. His body did need rest. And rest is what his body got. His eyes practically slammed shut when he got into the room. He is going to be pissed off when he wakes up. Kakashi scooped up Sasuke and brought him back inside to lay him on the couch. Sakura instantly dashed off her tree and back into the house with her precious idol. Kiba soon came back to life and looked around with confusion. "Hey Kurenai-sensei, what happened to everyone?" Kiba inquired as calmly as he could. Kurenai looked at the boy with disappointment at first before realizing he may have just been upset at the moment and never intended for the punch to hurt. They went inside Kiba. "We should go too." Kurenai put a hand on Kiba's shoulder and walked back into the house. She was too busy thinking about the mental state of her pupil to see the smiles both Shino and Hinata wore all the way into the house. She didn't even sense the presence at the edge of the woods that was looking upon them. Naruto groaned when he woke up. He felt eerily similar to the day before in terms of soreness. Once again his muscles saw it fit to scream at him for pushing them too hard after only a day's worth of rest. But today was a little different from yesterday for a reason Naruto could quite put his finger on. One thing was for certain though. He couldn't hold a thought in his mind to save his life. His brain was all kinds of fuzzy and throbbing. He found that moving any of his limbs would result in a stronger headache and more muscle pains. Then it hit Naruto. Like the Konoha wall falling down on him. The Sandaime had gone over things like this with him. The effects of certain types and the after effects for when it starts wearing off. In short, Naruto had been poisoned, but by what and by whom he could not say for sure. It took him several long minutes and a few falls, but eventually he was able to stand on his own two legs without shaking so much. He made his way to the door and shakily turned the knob. He slowly stumbled his way to the living room. When he arrived there it took every ounce of his strength not to puke up everything in his stomach at the time. In the middle lay a woman in a pool of blood. Most likely hers judging by how she was laying in it. She couldn't have been more than 20 or 30. Kneeling in the blood was a small boy with a black hair. He was sitting there and just letting the tears flow out of his eyes. His hands rested on his thighs and they were shaking like he was freezing to death in the room. When the child heard Naruto he hopped up to his feet and clenched his fists. "Look what happened. This is all you and your stupid ninja's fault." Tears began streaming down his face with renewed vigor. "Look what they did to my mom." His voice was quiet and distant. Naruto frowned at the boy. "What's your name?" "Inari." The now identified Inari said with a sneer. Naruto sent a glare to the small child that made his legs buckle with fright. "Toughen up, Inari." Naruto's voice came out like silk. Like being tough was the easiest thing he could do and yet made the most sense. Inari opened his mouth to speak before Naruto smacked him across the face. "If you think it will get easier from here on, you are wrong. But how can I be tough? Both of my parents are—" Another resounding crack across the face made the boy shut his mouth. Sadly, the tears just kept on rolling down his face. "So? At least you knew who they were and could honor their memory." Inari started crying more. Naruto smacked him again. "Stop crying. Save your tears for when you need them. Instead of laying about and doing nothing, why don't you try to get revenge against the people who did this?" Naruto asked with barely held rage. What do you mean?" Naruto let out low growl. Inari took a step away from the pale ninja. I mean, why don't you get vengeance? Why don't you want to strike back? Why don't you want to just sit around and blame the world? Yeah, your mom died and your father is gone, but that doesn't give you the right to blame others. There is no reason you can't avenge them and be the hero. Make them proud, Inari, and they will rest peacefully in the afterlife. With that, Naruto turned and went to walk out the door. When he got outside, he had to stand still for a moment. Moving too much left him kinda dizzy and unable to think. He had heard nor seen any of his team or Team 7 since he woke up. He vaguely remembered that they were here for some bridge. Naruto knew of only one bridge in the area, so he would go there. He turned his body to the direction of the bridge and began making his way there. Albeit rather slowly. At the bridge, currently Kurenai and Kakashi were inside of a very thick mist created by Zabuza. Kakashi sported a nasty slash across his chest. Kurenai's body was littered with all kinds of bruises and small cuts, clothing on her shoulders were torn. How much longer do you think you both can last? The ominous voice of Zabuza rang out through the thick mist. Kakashi had his left eye closed and his right open, letting his Sharingan soak in any visual clues they could use to find him. Kurenai used her sensory ability to sense out any movement, though that was proving to be rough. Long enough to take you down, Kakashi called out confidently. Kurenai eyed his curiously from his words. At the rate they were going and the damage they were taking, they would not last another 10 minutes, let alone long enough to win. A thunderous roaring laugh was heard from all angles. Bold words. And just like that, a giant metal sword came out of nowhere, aiming right at Kurenai's midsection. Kakashi turned just in time to see the blade meet her stomach. The two halves of her body became separated in an instant. Zabuza looked at Kakashi with a confident smirk hidden behind his bandages. One down, one to go. Kakashi stood completely paralyzed. He could not believe he just let another comrade die. Right in front of him nonetheless. The mist around Zabuza thickened, consuming him whole. Kakashi calmed himself. He was now in Anbu mode. There could be no failure. No retreat. Only success, and that's exactly what he planned to get. For Kurenai, in an ice dome, things were not looking good in the slightest. The mysterious masked person had successfully trapped them in some weird kind of dome made up of self-repairing ice mirrors. The masked enemy appeared in every single one of the mirrors. Sasuke and Kiba looked around the place with trepidation. They had no idea what these mirrors did, but it would be a safe bet to assume that they weren't a good thing. Kiba and his partner Orochimaru looked around furiously, looking for any chance of exit. There is no escape, the voice calmly called out. Kiba growled at the mirrors. Sasuke stayed quiet for the most part. In fact, he was doing something he deeply hated. He was regretting something. He regretted poisoning Naruto before he left so he could have all the glory. He could really have used him in this fight. We'll see about that, right, Orochimaru? The dog yipped not 2 seconds after that. Shikyaku no Jutsu. The dog-like boy called out, dropping to all fours and letting his chakra envelop his body. His appearance became much more feral looking due to the jutsu. Jujin Bushin. Kiba called out. A puff of smoke later, the small dog Orochimaru had become a perfect copy of his master. Together the two stand on all fours. Kiba on the bottom and Orochimaru directly on top of him. Orochimaru hopped off of his master and in a second the duo launched off the ground together. Kiba's voice rang out as the two Kibas became spinning gray masses of chakra. Gatsuga. Together the two masses of chakra sped through the mist at a single mirror. The two collided on and spun on it. Little chunks of ice were being chipped off in every direction as the pair drilled into the mirror. When they stopped, they hopped back to look at the damage. Much to their joint horror, the ice simply repaired itself. As you can see, there is no escape. Please lay down your arms as I don't wish to harm you. I simply need you to stay out of Lord Zabuza's way. The mysterious voice called out softly. Sasuke listened intently to the voice. It was most likely a female by the sound of the voice. I don't know about the bastard here, but I don't plan on giving up. Kiba declared loudly. He puffed his chest for extra emphasis. Sasuke looked at him. He wondered where exactly he was getting this extra confidence from. Whatever you say, idiot, was all Sasuke grunted out. He didn't fully believe in himself, but he would be damned if he was simply going to give up. That was not the Uchiha way. Kiba slapped Sasuke on the shoulder. That's the spirit. In that split moment, the person in the mirror lifted up their arm, 3 senbon in their hand, and let them all fly. Seemingly from nowhere, senbon exploded from the mirrors and came down in a hailstorm of metal. In a matter of seconds, Sasuke, Kiba and Akamaru became little more than pincushions. Both Sasuke and Kiba struggled to rise to their feet. Every muscle in their body felt like it was on fire, but they knew they had to press on. Kiba looked to Akamaru. The dog only had one needle in him, and it was in his neck, thus putting him to sleep. Once more the hail of senbon came flying out of the mirrors. Kiba desperately attempted to use his enhanced senses and speed to dodge everything. He only succeeded in dodging the first few bunches of senbon before getting drilled again. Sasuke too attempted to dodge around them. However, he brought a kunai out and blocked as many as his normal eyes could block. He too got dropped eventually. The senbon were simply too fast for Sasuke to block all of them. From the outside it would look as though Kiba and Sasuke were dancing around inside the dome. Then suddenly their dance would end and they would fall to their knees. They would pant heavily and struggle to stand again. Then the dance would start all over again. This went on 3 more times before it stopped. The masked fighter watched curiously as the dog-like ninja shakily stood. "Why do you keep standing? It is pointless to keep fighting." And much to the surprise of the seemingly female nin, the dog ninja smiled. "Because in my clan it is against the code for us to just roll over and die. But it goes deeper than that. If you are going to kill me, then I am going to make you work for it." Gatsuga. Kiba launched off the ground in the gray spiral of chakra. As if on cue, the hail of senbon came flying out of the mirrors, but this time nothing happened. Nothing bad anyway. Instead of causing a series of painful stabs, they simply bounced off him. Kiba eventually slowed down to a stop, right in front of Sasuke to help him up. "Hey Sasuke, did you see that? They just bounced off," Kiba said confusedly at his discovery. When Sasuke opened his eyes, he had to wipe the water from them. He would never admit it, but he had let a few tears go. How could he not though? He was about to die and ultimately fail at his lifelong dream. But now that his eyes were open, he could see so much better. Everything looked crisp and clear. So focused and accurate. Kiba took a step back when he looked at Sasuke's eyes. A little worried that they had turned red all of the sudden. Well, till he actually remembered what that meant. "Hey Sasuke, your Sharingan is active." The proud Uchiha could not contain the smirk that came with that knowledge. "Now let's win," the pale Uchiha declared with pride. With Tazuna, Shino, Hinata, and Sakura. Tazuna cowered slightly behind Shino. The battles going on ahead of them were the stuff that Tazuna could never prepare for. He could almost feel the energy that was being excreted off these two fights. Hinata and Sakura both felt the same as Tazuna. Shino did as well, but did not show any outward signs of it. This is the real deal, huh?" Tazuna asked in fear. The old man could barely stand the pressure of being in the situation. Let alone one as intense as this. "Yes, it is Tazuna. This is the way that shinobi fight each other," Shino informed his charge. "But I would not worry if I were in your position. Technically speaking, we have the advantage of numbers. Including 2 Jonin-rank ninja." What Shino said is true. Both Kakashi-sensei and Kurenai-sensei are Jonin and are very hard to defeat in battle by a single Jonin alone. Hinata added, more for the attempt to make herself feel better than anything. Plus they have Sasuke. He can't be beat, I promise. Sakura called out confidently. She truly had faith in her self-proclaimed idol and love. Tazuna looked confused before facing the young pink-haired girl. Which one is that again? Sakura looked shocked at first but put on a smile when she realized that this gave her the chance to brag about him. Oh, he is the one with the dark hair, deep mysterious eyes, and pale skin. He was the #1 rookie of the year back at the academy too. He comes from a really cool clan called the Uchiha. Sakura rattled off in a matter of seconds and thoroughly confused Tazuna. Is that the one with the silted eyes? Again Sakura jerked backwards as if she had been struck. What? No. That idiot is Naruto. The one that hurt my precious Sasuke. She said with hearts in her eyes. Pardon my intrusion on your description, but why exactly is Sasuke precious to you? Hinata asked quietly. Sakura put her finger to her chin to think. Because there is not a single flaw to him. Think about it. He has something for everyone to like. I personally like his hair. She drifted off into her dreamland. Hinata, Shino and Tazuna all sat there and thought, while keeping aware of the ever-changing situations of the fight, and thought on her words. Instantly all three of them came up with answers. He is mean. Hinata spoke softly. He does not value teamwork. Shino analyzed. What? And none of that is true. Sakura said with a horrified expression. She simply could not believe that someone, anyone really, could see any imperfection with him. He was simply perfect. If Ino were here she would agree. Sasuke is perfect. Well, I may not be Sasuke, but I came to help, said a somewhat tired voice from behind the group. Naruto. Hinata cried out happily. When Kurenai told the team that Naruto's life signs were weak, from a sickness, Hinata thought, she wasn't happy. Naruto had easily become the strongest member of the group and the much-needed strength. It is good to see that your health has returned to you, Naruto. The situation here is a precarious one at best. Kurenai-sensei and Kakashi-sensei are currently fighting against Zabuza towards the center of the mist. Sasuke and Kiba are fighting a masked fighter inside of that ice dome you see over there. Shino informed his teammate. Naruto did not like the words at all. He didn't know of Zabuza, but for him to be able to take on two Jonin would make him one deadly person. Nor did Naruto know of this ice-using person, but if they could hold Sasuke and Kiba in there with little effort, they must be tough. I see. Thank you, Shino. Now I have to go save a stuck-up prick and a dog boy. Shino and Hinata stopped him from going. Let us help you, Shino stated. In truth, he feared for his teammate. Going in there alone was pure suicide. Shino, we both know that is a bad idea. You aren't much of a physical fighter and I doubt your bugs could eat through ice. Shino thought about it and nodded. It was true. He was best off from here where he could monitor things with his insects. And Hinata, we need someone here to defend in close quarters for when someone comes out of the mist. I doubt Sakura here will be of any help. But before Sakura could even respond, Naruto was gone into the mist. Good luck, was the singular thought on their minds, except Sakura when Naruto left. Ice Dome. Kiba and Sasuke lay exhausted on the ground. Senbon were scattered about the place. Most were on the ground but a few were inside of the boys. At least that is what Naruto saw upon getting closer to the giant ice dome. What he didn't see, however, was the person in the actual mirrors. Suffice to say, when he entered the dome to rescue Sasuke and Kiba, he was actually quite surprised. Why are you here? The calm voice of the mirrors asked. Naruto turned towards the mirrors once he realized that both Sasuke and Kiba were knocked out but not dead. An interesting course of action considering this person could have killed them. I was here to help them but they are simply dead weight right now. Naruto remarked rather calmly despite the fact that the people in the mirrors were multiplying. Soon every mirror had a person in it. Shinobi are but tools to be used, and when they are no longer working they are no longer useful. Naruto nodded in agreement. That's the textbook answer, sure, but emotions do come into play. A well-motivated person is normally better than someone who isn't. The person in the mirror calmly nodded. That is true. Emotions do not matter as long as the mission or will is done. Naruto crossed his arms over his chest. Is that why you left them alive? He gestured over to the two prone bodies. The masked person flinched at that. They are no longer in Zabuza's way. Therefore I no longer need to kill them. Naruto actually smiled at that. You really don't have that shinobi sense, do you? You realize that by letting them live you give them the chance to grow stronger and possibly come back to kill you or Zabuza later? They may even kill your precious Zabuza. That to me would be reason enough to end their lives. You want me to kill them? The voice could not believe it. This kid wanted his comrades to die. Naruto waved his hand. I won't let that happen now that I am here, but I would have finished them. When it comes to defending what is precious to me, I will not hesitate to do what must be done. The mirror person nodded. What Naruto was saying actually made a great deal of sense. I see. You are right. What is your name so I may remember it? Naruto gave a mock bow and a smile. Naruto, and yours? The voice nodded. Yuki Haku. Naruto nodded and dropped into a fighting stance. Haku raised a senbon-filled hand and prepared to throw them. I am sorry. As am I, Doden. Doryuden. Naruto sucked in a breath and spat out a large pool of mud. He had already come up with a battle, hence why he entered the ice dome so calmly. He knew that ice releases water and air. He knew that water was weak to earth. Thus he would need an earth move to bust the ice. Luckily the Sandaime had taught him one such technique. Haku hesitated for a brief moment when Naruto called out the jutsu. But before Haku could react, it was already far too late. A muddy dragon arose from the pit of mud that Naruto had spat out previous. The dragon let out a ferocious roar before flying out and smashing through the ice mirrors as if they were tiny pieces of string. Sadly for Naruto, his control on the jutsu, a side effect of the drug he was injected with, coupled with his weak mastery of the jutsu, made the dragon fall apart moment after smashing the dome. Naruto watched as Haku was sent spiraling out of the mirror. Haku landed with a small thud just a few feet away from Naruto. He walked over to Haku and knelt down. Naruto's hand went and pulled the mask off the face to reveal a girl looking back at him. "So you are a girl. It was hard to tell seeing as how you wear those puffy clothes." Naruto smiled at the girl. Haku opened her eyes upon hearing Naruto's voice. In truth, Haku was seriously surprised that Naruto did not finish her off after the speech about doing the same to others. "Why do you let me live?" Much to her surprise, Naruto smiled again. Albeit the smile was a bit strained. That Earth Dragon Jutsu was his ace in the hole, given to him by the Sandame. He is lucky. If he had used any of his chakra to get here, he would not have been able to do it. Because you let Sasuke and Kiba live when you could have killed them. It was around that time that they heard the crackle of lightning. With Kakashi minutes before Naruto's arrival. The battle between Kakashi and Zabuza was a wild one. Neither of them were able to land any successful hits, while neither of them have been able to land anything more than scrapes and bruises. Kakashi though was actually on the losing side of the fight. But then again he had numerous disadvantages. One being that his Sharingan eye was open and thus he had a constant chakra drain. Another was that the blood he was losing from his cut was steadily making him weaker and weaker. And lastly, the death of Kurenai. That death had weighed heavily on his mind for many reasons. The main one would have to be that it happened right in front of him, but he was unable to stop it. Not to mention that Kurenai had just made Jonin. And then there was Asuma, who would no doubt be upset with him. "Getting tired, Kakashi?" The somewhat ragged voice of Zabuza called out. Kakashi had been his greatest threat as of yet since the Mizukage. This had been one hell of a test for skills, and if he won he was sure he could face the Mizukage again. But Kakashi was stubborn and refused to die. "Not even. I told you I was going to watch you die. Especially now that you killed a fellow Leaf Nin and Jonin." Kakashi's labored but steely voice answered back. Zabuza let out a tired and dry laugh. "See if you can keep that resolve with your head split." Zabuza burst from the mist and brought his sword directly down, intending to cleave him in half. Kakashi's Sharingan caught this and slowed the events that happened next down. The sliver-haired Jonin jumped backwards at the precise moment needed to dodge the sword. Zabuza grunted and attempted to bring his sword around for a horizontal strike when the sword slipped from his hands and went sailing towards the genin and Tazuna. A scream was heard. When the mist cleared, Kakashi's eyes widened, so did Zabuza's. Behind the demon of the mist was none other than Kurenai. During the second swing she had lodged two kunai into both of Zabuza's shoulder blade, right into the joint, and effectively shut off his control of his arms. "What the? I thought you were dead," Zabuza asked, exasperated. Kurenai gave him a sickeningly sweet smile. "What you both saw was a well-timed genjutsu. I was simply waiting for the right time to strike, but it seems I may have caused another problem." She finished with a sad expression. Kakashi too looked to be upset. "But we still have to finish you off. Hopefully the other two are still okay." Kurenai put two more kunai into both of his kneecaps and forced him to the ground. She nodded to Kakashi before darting over to the genin group. Kakashi performed a few hand signs before lightning began to crackle from his fingertips. "This is it, Zabuza. May you find peace in the afterlife." And with that he took off at blinding speeds to ram the lightning-filled hand into his chest. "Lord Zabuza," Haku called out. She would not let the silver-haired Kakashi to end her master's life like that. She tried to get up and to dash over there. She didn't know what she would do, but she had to block that attack somehow. However, Naruto had other plans. When Haku attempted to run, Naruto made a brief dash and tackled her to the ground. Haku kicked and struggled under Naruto. Both of them struggled to keep the other from accomplishing their goal. Eventually the crackling of the lightning got louder before it was silenced. Naruto and Haku looked up to see Kakashi's hand deep inside the chest of Zabuza. His eyes were glazed over and his body became limp. Haku opened her mouth to scream, but Naruto's hand clamped over it. "Shush, Haku. If Kakashi sees you now he would most likely kill you. I get that you are upset. You lost your master or father or whatever he was to you. But you need to be quiet. Naruto slowly lifted his hand off her mouth. He was my everything. He found me when I was young. He saved me from myself and protected me. Now I am nothing but a broken tool. Haku said with nothing but heart-wrenching sadness. Haku, what makes a tool useful in your opinion? Naruto asked quietly. He didn't really see people as tools anymore. He rather saw people, other than his precious people, as more of jutsu. Each one was perfect for a situation and if used properly can have wonderful effects. A purpose or something to live for. She answered simply. Naruto nodded and got off of the girl. He stood above her and offered his hand to her. The mist cleared right as Naruto stood up. Haku looked into his emerald-silted eyes with interest. Then I will give you another purpose. Be my friend and my comrade. Help me achieve my goals and I will help you achieve yours. Haku thought about his offer. If she accepted then she would likely have to go back to Konoha with him. But what else could she do? She was nowhere strong enough to face the Mizukage to fulfill Zabuza's dream. Strange thing was she was never told who the Mizukage was. But on the other hand accepting Naruto's offer gave her a chance to be with someone who understood her if only slightly. Plus he offered to help her achieve her goals which only consisted of killing the Mizukage and finding a new master. Haku took his hand. I accept Master Naruto, she said politely. Naruto blushed at the use of master in his name. You don't have to call me that. Haku frowned. Unless you want to. Just try not to do it in public. It may give off the wrong vibe. The wrong vibe? Haku asked, tilting her head. Naruto sighed. We will talk about it later. Right now let's get back to TH. He was cut off by the sound of a wooden cane hitting the metal of the bridge. Ah, I love it when a plan comes together. Thank you for killing Zabuza. He was all used up anyway and damn expensive. Gato said with a smirk, behind him a small army of bandits. They all looked around with smirks. Especially when their eyes landed on Haku. Hey, you're that brat that broke my arm. Hey fellas, kill her first. Can we play with her first? A random bandit called out from the mob. Gato pushed his glasses up and shrugged. If you want. The mob gave out a howl of energy. Not 2 seconds later a bolt from a crossbow landed right in front of them. Everyone looked to see little Inari with a horde of pissed-off villagers behind him. Time for some payback. Inari called out and not a moment was wasted as the horde charged forward. It was actually quite the sight for the bandits and Gato. To see 60-some-odd people rushing at you with various sharp items, or just plain fists, practically foaming at the mouth. Their eyes practically screamed for their blood. Needless to say it was a practical bloodbath. Those that weren't outright killed jumped off the unfinished bridge into the harsh water below. Sadly, those men died too. Heck, even Gato jumped off the edge instead of being gutted. It was a proud day for the villagers indeed. Back with the Konoha teams. Currently Team 8 and Team 7 were at Tazuna's house with a critical Sakura on the couch. When Zabuza's blade left his hands it went spinning over and cut Sakura pretty deeply on her stomach. Kurenai knew that it was her fault this happened so she had spent every second using all of her chakra to heal her. Sasuke and Kiba and Akamaru were currently in the room Naruto slept in. They had all the needles pulled from their skin and were laid to rest. Truth be told their wounds weren't even that bad but Haku had hit every point needed to put them down harmlessly. Speaking of which, Kakashi and the other 2 genin from Team 8 were talking with the ice user. Naruto sat next to Hinata and Shino while Kakashi and Haku sat at a table, each on the opposite end. So Haku is it? The Jonin asked simply. Haku nodded back. Yuki Haku. Yes, that is my name. Kakashi nodded and rubbed the back of his neck. And here I thought all of your clan was wiped out. What are your plans now? Haku instantly looked to Naruto. Naruto sheepishly rubbed the back of his head but nodded anyway. I plan to return to Konoha with Naruto. Kakashi raised a brow at that. Why would she want to come to Konoha? And how was Naruto involved in all this? Well, first things first, why do you want to come to Konoha? Kakashi asked in an extremely serious tone of voice. This voice was nothing like the voice he normally used. This voice was all business. Naruto told me that Konoha values bloodlines. I am the last of clan and would be more than willing to re-establish my clan in Konoha. But I will only mate on my terms. Haku responded in an icy tone. Kakashi nodded. Many females went that route too, and the Yondaime is an understanding man and would most likely allow that. Well, I see no reason why that wouldn't be allowed. The Yondaime is a generous man and would allow you into Konoha. Plus he has a pretty good reign on the council, so I am sure that they will accept your terms. Naruto's eyes narrowed at that. The Yondaime was not as generous as Kakashi was making him out to be. Haku caught that look and frowned slightly. At any rate, it is late and we should all be getting some rest. And with that everyone split and went to their separate rooms. Kurenai stayed behind to watch Sakura and to clean up Tsunami and the bloodstains. She was sad that the woman had died but was proud that she had become the symbol of pride for Inari. On the roof late at night, Naruto stared at the moon with worry. The events of today were simply a stepping stone to the real fights of life. The blood he saw today was but a taste of how things really worked for a shinobi. It was his line of work after all. He would have to be a part of it at one point. He heard a slight creaking on the wood. He turned around to see Haku sitting next to him and staring at the moon as well. "Do you not like your Yondaime?" she asked quietly. Naruto sighed to himself. "It's not that I have a problem with him. It's him who seems to have a problem with me. He glares at me all the time and treats me like the scum of the earth even though I have done nothing wrong. I live on my own. I train with one other person. And now I have a team and you. That is a grand total of 5 people I even talk to. I'm not bothering anyone." Haku nodded in understanding. She knew what it was like to be persecuted for just being alive. "I know what that is like. In my homeland there is a civil war going on right now over bloodlines. My father was one of the people who hated and fought against bloodlines. My mother actually had the same one as me, but when my father found out, he killed her and tried to kill me. I used my power to kill him before he could harm me. I ran from my home and that's when Zabuza found me." Naruto nodded, though he wondered what it would be like to fight alongside his father. The cool things they could do together. Maybe they could become famous as a duo or something of that nature. "Naruto?" Haku called out quietly. "Yes?" he responded, slightly curious too as what she was going to ask. "Do you know who your parents are?" Naruto frowned at the moon. He was quiet for several minutes and Haku thought that she had offended the pale boy. "No, I don't, but I hope to meet my father someday. He is alive and that's all I know about him. If my mother is alive, then I hope I get to meet her too." Naruto responded with a slight smile. "How do you know he is alive?" she asked, referring to his father. "My grandfather of sorts told me. He said he is a famous ninja and is still alive somewhere. One day, when I'm strong enough, I plan to go out and look for him." Haku actually smiled at that. "What are you going to do when you find him?" Naruto grinned and ran a hand through his hair. "I haven't really thought about it. I think I'd punch him in the stomach for not being there when I needed him, then hug him." Haku nodded. "When that day comes, I hope you will let me come with you. I owe you that much as per our deal." Naruto smiled. He really hadn't expected Haku to be so civil or calm about the situation. But he was glad she was willing to be his friend and comrade. "Thank you, Haku. We should probably get back before they start to worry." Haku and Naruto rose to their feet. Haku hopped off the roof and onto the ground. Naruto stopped at the edge and looked back to the moon. "I will find you one day. I promise." And with that he hopped off the roof to the ground below.